Good morning, everybody. And we are just waiting for people to join us this morning as we start session 2. It is for some people in Europe, Saturday morning. It could be anywhere around the rest of the world. I've got no idea. I've completely lost track of where we are in the world. What time is it where you are, Natasha?
I am 11 o'clock.
11 o'clock in Doha, and Laura's joined us from Australia, and it's 6 p.m. over there. So wherever you are in the world, welcome. We've got a very exciting morning for you for the next 3 hours. Myself and Natasha will be your host. Natasha, how are you this morning?
Great, absolutely fantastic. We are, I suppose, a little bit tired, a little bit awake, a little bit in between. A little bit jealous of some people, i.e. Laura, who can drink wine at this time and it doesn't look weird.
Well, so, I mean, we've sneakily got some under the counter, haven't we? So try not to worry about it. Again, for anybody that is joining us today and hasn't been hosted before by myself, I do have 3 dogs and they do get excited. So if you hear some yapping, it's probably not me. I will, of course, mute myself for most of the morning. We are going to sort of start off the morning by just thinking about what we would do with our seat at the table. So if you are joining us this morning and you are able to put a message in the chat, talk to us about what you would do with your seat at the table, and perhaps our first few panelists might be up for joining in the conversation. Natasha, I'm battling pugs. I think Natasha's battling kids. So you know, we're multitasking. We're women. This is what we do. This is our professional life. We are both women. We are professionals. We are women editors. And this morning we're also battling kids and dogs and other things like that.
He's walked up in a right old strop because I told him to be quiet.
Yeah, well, you know, to be honest, you'll have to get used to that, won't you? So that's fair enough. So, Natasha, I'm going to start off with you and say, what would you do with your seat at the table?
I think for me, it's about absolutely causing disruption. I think there's just so much going on now where there's this ridiculous expectation for us to conform and follow ridiculous rules. We were just speaking to Effa 10 minutes ago about colour of hair and all kinds of crazy things that we're still addressing. And it's like, can we just get down to the crux of change, please? And stop fussing with all of the nonsense. Does that have an impact? Does the colour of my hair have an impact on anything I'm doing in terms of actually performing my job role? Like, no. So can we just focus on that, please? So for me, it's about absolutely causing disruption and starting to, tip some of those tables over and just making change now. I'm fed up, basically, fed up.
Good. I'm glad you're fed up. I think we are all a little bit fed up. It's sorry. I'm going to have to chuck them out in a minute because I can't do the whole morning with dogs kind of fighting on my lap. I think what we need to appreciate, all of us, every single person joining us today or watching this later on, is that we already have a seat at the table. Some of us are squished in round the side. We've just got to use it. We can't just think, hey, I'm at the table, I'm going to stay here and be quiet in case they kick me off the table. You have to think about, okay, so now I'm here, what am I going to do? How am I going to contribute? And, you know, we have our professional tables at work, but you know, we have other tables. Today we have a very large women-ed table. You are at the table. What are you going to do with it? Who else are you going to bring? How are you going to make them feel welcome? And hopefully you're not annoyed by dogs too much. Perhaps a fewer or Laura, you'd like to just contribute and say anything else that you know what you think you would bring to the table.
Well, thank you very much. A warm welcome from a London town as well. So coming from the table, I'm going to allude to it in my presentation about sometimes you just got to do it alone, and that's for me. It's like you can put me at the table, but sometimes you have to be the person to start that thing as well. Interestingly enough, I was sharing about my hair. It's caused a little bit of controversy, but I have a colleague that I'm meeting later, and she has blue. Like she's actually done. Like I mix it, but she's done the blue and cream hair, and we're kind of a force to be reckoned with. So we sorted down the corridor and things like that as well. For me, at the seat of the table is also having somebody next to me. So it's not just me taking the full seat, but also giving the opportunity for someone else to take part of the seat as well. and also pushing others to bring them forward, because I think that's really important, that when you've got the power and we don't realize the power that we have, it's also to hold the hands of others to bring them with us on our journey as well. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you. Laura.
Hi everyone. So I'm joining from Australia tonight. So I think women need to be anywhere that decisions are being made. And so a little bit later, and that's something that Ruth Bader Ginsburg used to say, and that's something that I love to say all the time now. And a little bit later in my presentation, I talk about my journey becoming a leader in the ed tech space, and the technology space being as fast-paced as it is. Things are evolving really rapidly, and women need to be part of that evolution in technology.
Absolutely. Really important that we are in all spaces, including that kind of ether, internet, tech space. I don't know what you call it. I'm very analog in my life. This is about as dramatic as I get in terms of technology. I had an Apple Watch for a while. God, that did my head in. I couldn't figure it out at all. So I'm back at the old-fashioned normal watch. So and we've got to push ourselves and get ourselves as many places as humanly possible. We're going to hand over to Afua in a moment to start her presentation, probably just a couple of minutes early. Please do tweet. We're using only one hashtag, and that is #WomenEd. You can use other hashtags if you like, but unless you use #WomenEd, we won't find you. Feel free to make a noise about it. Feel free to join in the chat. Feel free to ask questions, anything at all. We're here for you this morning, and it's going to be really exciting. Natasha, is there anything else from you before we hand over to Afua and we get absolutely cracking?
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely excited about Afua to open us this morning. So yeah, let's go with this.
Right, are you ready? In which case, over to Afua, and sometimes you just have to go it alone. Thank you ever so much.
Technology. Right, just going to share my screen. So hopefully you can all see my screen.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So I've got literally whistle stop tour, and I've got my phone just to the side of me to make sure that I don't run over as well. So as we're alluding to this particular year, it's kind of like if you don't have a seat in the table, you just got to bring your own seat. But as I alluded to what I said earlier, sometimes you've got to be the person to go into the world, and also you've got to do it by yourself as well. So just a tiny bit about me. I love being a creative person, so I do my own hair, and I like to express myself with different colours as well. And so that for me is some of the things that hopefully those themes will come through my talk. I love traveling. I love people, but I also like traveling by myself because that challenges me to go into areas that maybe aren't the traditional areas as a woman of colour would traditionally go to. But for me, it's important to push those boundaries as well. I've recently been successful in being a contributing author, and for me this is really a proud moment because as somebody who's part of the neurodivergent community, I struggled with learning for a long time, but meeting inspirational teachers have really helped me to push me through to get me to this stage as well. And also just to let you know that I'm not actually a teacher in that sense. I do work in education, but I'm actually working in healthcare, and I'm a qualified operating department practitioner. It's probably a role that you've never heard of, but I always say it's one of the best jobs in the world as well. So I just want us to spend about 30 seconds to think about, so we always talk about equity, diversity, equality, but for me, we kind of don't really talk about inclusion that much as well. So I want us to just think about this first question that I have, like, what does inclusion mean to you? So as we're going through our themes, think about what does inclusion actually mean to you? And then I've just got a few sort of tasters in terms of what we can potentially talk about as well. The first thing I always say is that how do you display this? When you're walking into a room or we're getting our seat in the table, the first thing that people look at is just how you are, isn't it? But how do you display inclusion? And an example is that I came into the room a little bit earlier thinking that nobody else would be in the room, but as soon as I came in, I was greeted, oh, good morning, and acknowledged as well. So acknowledgement is really, really important as well. And one of the things that I really want to emphasize is how do you walk into the room as well? So do you walk in with your head bowed down, or do you walk with your head up as well? So one of the tips, a lot of our meetings are now virtual. And one of the tips that I was given is that you make sure you smile just before you come on camera. So that means that when you do come on camera, you've got a nice smile on your face. Sometimes we're not conscious about how we look like as well. And that can also have an impact on that inclusion thing as well. So if you see if you can try it and see how it works for you as well. Language is really important in terms of that inclusion. When I come into a lot of meetings or I'm in virtual meetings, and the best thing about doing this is that we can connect with each other online, which is amazing, or internationally as well. But the language that I always hear is hi guys. Why are we always doing this hi guys? We're always making it into this male sort of part of life. Why won't we say hi everyone? So it's thinking about that. So it becomes like this habit, and I hear it all the time. And I heard it yesterday in a meeting. Oh, hi guys, and it's like no, let's say hi everyone, because we've got to make sure that we're hitting everybody within the group, within the team. When we're reaching out and we're trying to get people to listen to us, we're trying to have that parity as well. So that's really, really important that we think about our language as well. Think about your role, the role that you play. Think about the role that you have, because all of us are powerful in the roles that we do. You may not realize how much power you have. So think about how you can make people feel included. Think about you as the role model that you are. How do you, as I'm saying, alluding to, how do you display this? How are you walking into the room? Because you're role modeling for somebody else to be like you. There's always going to be somebody, you may not feel that somebody isn't watching you, but you are constantly being watched as well. So it's really important that you understand about your role as well. And people do aspire to be like you, whether you like it or not. So it's about being that positive change that you need to be as well. And are you a role model, as I said, or do you want to be a role model? It's sometimes when I say this to people as well, they're a bit like, oh, no, I'm not a role model. But you have to understand that you are, because you've been there first. And some do want to. And one thing I always say is about sustainability. You're not always hopefully going to do the same job. You will be hopefully moving on to bigger or better things, or maybe the same thing, but somewhere else. But there's always going to be somebody that will take over that role. So how do you successfully plan? How do you make people feel included? Do you keep everything to yourself, or do you delegate out so you can actually start developing individuals to feel that they're actually part of your team or the project or whichever thing that you're managing as well? So why do you sometimes need to go it alone? Think about leadership. What is your leadership style? It doesn't matter what style you have. You can be laissez-faire, you can be transformational, you can be transactional, you can be a servant leader, any sort of style that you have. You don't have to mold yourself into being something that you don't feel comfortable in. But think about your leadership style. All of us here are leaders, whether we like it or not, as well. So we have to make sure that we're utilizing our styles as well. Also, I haven't put it on here, but think about followership. You can be a leader, but if people aren't following you, then it's not going to work. In the role that I do, I'm proud to say that I'm the first non-nurse in a big nursing role, and I look after nursing workforce for the hospital that I work for, and that's the first time that's happened. And there's lots of different ideas that I bring up, but if I don't have people with me, it's not going to work. But a lot of the things that I've introduced, so for instance, I'm introducing social evenings for international recruits. That's never happened before. So you may need to bring an idea forward, but you need that support as well. But it's also thinking about leading. It also gives you a bit of mental strength. You may sit there and feel frustrated. The beauty of being part of the Women's Ed network is that you can also network, especially if you're utilising Twitter. You may be in your own small house and think, oh, I'm so frustrated. There's nobody hit my mental ability. But actually, you put a message out there, you guarantee that somebody will be there to support you. And that can help with that mental strength for you to then drive what you need to do by yourself as well. And sometimes that's what I do that quite a lot. So that's kind of helped me to drive that mental agility as well, and that resilience. So who's going to start the revolution? It's got to be you. As I said, you have to do this sometimes by yourself. You can't just sit back and relax. And also, why are you going to wait for someone to do this first? Why can't you be the person to actually sow those seeds and let other people work with you to let that tree grow as well? So that's really, really important that you think about the revolution. We are revolutionists. we are women, we do what we need to do as well. And why wait? Time doesn't wait for anyone. Time is also going. We're all getting older. We've already got 10 minutes older as we've been on this presentation. So when is the right time? There is never sometimes the right time to start something and go it alone. Sometimes you just have to do it. You might be told this is not the right time, but then I also will counteract that and said, when is the right time? Sometimes we have to start small, and then it goes bigger, and then it grows bigger and fruitful as well. And as I said before, with followers, it's so important to have your followers as well. And a follower for me isn't just about you just leading. Sometimes you have to step back for others to also go it alone as well. And you're there to follow them, to support them as well. So it all works in that really nice supportive network as well. And if you don't have a seat, well, as our nice, I didn't have the graphic here, but it also says that if you don't have a seat, you bring one to the table. If you don't have a seat and there's not enough space, I just say sit on the table as well. So you have to make sure that you're able to kind of get that space as well. And actually, if you don't, and if you don't have a seat, do you actually need a seat at the table, or are you going to create your own table? Sometimes you have to think about that as well. So I don't have to always sit with someone. I can start myself, and somebody will come to my table as well. And the last thing, what you have to think about also is this will make you, at the end of the day, it's going to make you feel happy. And it's about being happily ever after. You started the revolution, you've got something off the ground. Sometimes you get something off the ground and you might leave a job, and somebody might continue it and make it fruitful as well. But hopefully once you've started, you can have your bottle of champagne, or if you drink or don't drink, bottle of water, something to treat yourself, to say, you know what, I've done this, and now I'm going to start the revolution as well. But actually, starting alone can bring up a lot of emotions as well. So as you can see on the graphic, maybe it makes you feel calm, maybe it makes you feel a little bit happy, or you can scream to say, actually, this is just not for me as well. But also think about what are the things that may be stopping you. One of the things may be loneliness. I always talk about when you're going it alone, or if you're starting on your managerial journey, it's being on a mountain and you're more exposed. But actually, as you can see on the graphic, when you get to that top of that mountain, whether it's putting an idea forward or somebody acknowledging it, you feel like you're going to jump for joy. But sometimes it is a lonely journey, and you have to be prepared for that loneliness as well. Imposter syndrome. This is something that is familiar to every single person that is here as well. We all have it. We have to just accept it. Yes, we work through it, but it is something that all of us will do. I'm here to talk to all of you as teachers, and I'm not actually working in the traditional education sense, even though I'm an educator in healthcare. So it's all that thing of, are people going to listen to me? Am I going to find resonance? But it's actually working together as well, and understanding that it's natural to feel that imposter syndrome, especially as sometimes you might be in a room full of suits and you may not come in a suit as well. So it's making sure actually my voice is going to get heard and I feel of value as well. The other thing could be fear. We all have fear. We have fear of the unknown. We're coming to do presentations. Those that are listening are like, oh God, it's the fear. Do I have to put my camera on, not my camera on? Do I look okay? Do I sound okay? All these emotions are all coming up as well. But we need to remember that fear actually means two things. You can forget everything and run away. And actually, you might end up living a life of pure regret, because you might just think, actually, if I just started that seed, maybe this will be, and you don't want to, and I always say, don't live a life of maybe, live a life of, at least I tried. At least I tried something as well. So we don't want to live, or maybe if I did this, maybe if I did that. Just go for it. Not every idea is going to be great, but at least it's out there to try it as well. So it's either that, or you can face everything and just rise. As the graphic says, rise, our glorious creations. All of us are glorious in our creations as well. So lastly from me, please remember that, as the graphic says, being 10% braver is better than not being brave at all. So just remember that a tiny bit of bravery, but gets you really, really far. So you need to make sure you own the lane. So you're going to own your idea, own what you want to do as well. Own the race, so you can actually own what you need to do in that race to get to where you need to be. And also the pace. You don't have to have other people take that and run away with the idea. You can be the person that can actually set that pace for things to change as well. And I'm going to leave you with this, and this is one of my favorite sayings. Haters will broadcast your failure, but they're actually going to whisper your success. So don't worry about the haters out there. Worry about those that are whispering about you. Thank you very much for listening.
That's brilliant. Sorry, over to you, Natasha.
No, I was going to say, I love that. And I love the whole haters are going to be out there, because they absolutely are. And do you know what? You just have to, I suppose it's about gaining that confidence though, isn't it? And as I suppose it's just, for me, it's been with age, as I've got older, I've become more confident in being able to address that as well. So yeah, definitely. I've really enjoyed that session, by the way. I feel like you've kind of really started a bit of a disruption. There's lots of things going on in the chat there as well. If anyone has any questions, obviously for Efwa, please add your bit there. Kezia, sorry, I interrupted you before I started.
No, not at all. I mean, I was trying to multitask. I'm trying to, behind the scenes, get a couple of people into the session that don't have passcodes and things like that. Flo, who we're about to hear from now, said, love the idea of starting the revolution. Yes, we really need one now. Mal is saying, I just want to say thank you. I felt really alone as a leader after taking a career break, and this network is combating that for me. So thank you again for that. If you we really support one another regardless of geographical location. I think what's lovely about Women Ed is we support one another no matter where or what or who we are. Just everybody's invited. Jess says, love your philosophy. Unyong says, I love this idea. Fear, really interesting points, raised a lot of them. They really resonate. Jess says, face everything and rise. Just do that. And Robin saying, thank you, wonderful, love the idea, people whispering your success, which you just want everyone to just think they can do it, I can do it. So loads of fantastic feedback. Efwa, thank you ever so much. I hope you're able to stay with us and join in the chat on Twitter, and a really positive start to our second session today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. Absolutely. And I just want to say, very inclusive as well. Inviting somebody who works in a different industry, it just shows how we can all network and how we all resonate. Does it, all those kind of breaking those barriers and boundaries as well. So thank you so much. Absolute pleasure.
No, brilliant. Absolute pleasure having you with us today. That's wonderful. Flo, we're going to be handing over to you in a minute. Absolutely delighted to see you this morning. I know you're just getting a few things sorted and sort of ready to go a little bit earlier than we have. If you do overrun today, that's okay. Unfortunately, our third session today with Holly Anderton, she's unable to join us this morning. So basically at that point, Natasha and I will be doing a couple of duets. We do a good meatloaf and share.
No, Flo, please don't. It's not going to be that great. Trust me, I haven't got that talent. So and no one is looking forward to that section. We are really good at talking.
Just when you mentioned duet, I just think, okay.
We're not going to go there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll maybe show some pictures of my dog, or talk about a 2-hour lunch duty in the rain. That was fun yesterday, wasn't it? Which is possibly why I'm also thinking about just finding somewhere warmer to live. My feet are still cold. So Flo, are you ready to kick us off? Are you just getting yourself sorted?
Cup of tea, start the day perfect.
That's perfect. That's all we need.
Yeah, I think I'm ready. So if I share my screen, I'm just wondering if you're going to see everything, because I've got my kind of notes on one side, and I'm like, what if they see my notes and I'm meant to be reading and talking to these things? So I hope you just see the screen.
He'll tell you if you do. Don't worry.
Just go. We can see what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if Flo, while you start sharing, and then I'll intro you, because I was really interested to hear. Yeah, so Flo supports the well-being of young people through creative practice. How many seconds on it? Sorry, right. So now you've heard my son and the dog in the background, obviously trying to multitask as we do. So Flo supports the well-being of young people through creative practice, and she has interactions with the community and has helped forge strong relationships in education. So her session today is, we titled it Different Chair, Different Story, Different Outcomes. And Are you ready, Flo, to get?
You know what? It's always the same. I'm trying to find the presentation. I know it's there,
Obviously, it's not going to work.
but I
It's
just think,
technology. It's never going to work at the right time.
I'm like, where is it? It's showing me you, and I'm like, no, I don't need to see me. I need to
You
see.
don't need to see me. No.
It's so annoying because I can see it on my screen. Hang about. Look, let's stop this. Let's just do this properly. Let's do this.
Just checking. Is Flo got co-host rights?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Cool.
I have all the bits with me.
Recording.
Hang on a minute. Let me. Yeah. How have you managed to go in twice, Flo? Have you added yourself on your phone as well?
Oh, okay. Don't worry, everybody. We've got a couple of technical issues. It wouldn't be a Women Ed session if we didn't. We'll get it sorted. No one be stressed.
There you go, Flo. One's removed.
Wonderful. We just need you to unmute yourself, Flo, and hopefully we won't have scary feedback.
Unmute.
Yeah, that's it. Perfect.
Okay, first things first. Now I just have to find where my lovely presentation is, which was open. I hope, maybe I just closed it.
Don't worry.
Yeah. Can you see that? I haven't shared my screen yet, so let me
share your screen.
Let's just see. We may just get technology right. We might window. See, this is it. This is where it gets hairy because I can't see my presentation on the screen, which is a really annoying. It really is annoying because I can see it here, but I just can't see it.
FYI, yes, this does reflect our everyday crazy, and you know, this is our normal kind of trying to do a million things at once, as always.
See, I can see the window. I can. It's all there for me. I can see you all, but I just cannot see.
Sorry to interrupt. Sometimes you have, like, when you're sharing, you have
Sure.
You have like entire screen window, and then I don't know if you're doing it via Chrome. So if you make your presentation full screen, first of all, and then you go to share screen, the middle one will say when you click on window, then you can go to the one that has the full screen already.
Right, let's go. Right, we're on full screen here, so that should be. See, technology is just amazing. Just when you think it isn't going to let you down, it lets you down at the last minute. Right, so I've got my full screen on, so that fingers crossed. I can see everybody else. No, it's just not doing it. It's not picking it up.
So if you click on share screen, and then if you've got like three options, you've got like three headings. So click on the middle one for the window.
Yeah, I'm on the window, but it's showing me just you. It's showing me what my screen is on. So if I click on that, I'm going to see yourselves, which is.
Oh, I see. You're actually doing. So if you actually click on your presentation now, your presentation will then show.
Okay.
Because it's whatever's on your screen. That's what you're doing. You're selecting the full screen.
Yeah. So I've got the full screen there now. I have it, which is on screen there now. But I need to get back to see. I can see my presentation, but I'm not sure you guys can. You can see my work. Oh, that's so sad. Dear, which is annoying because I've got everything up. Share screen.
Yeah.
Can I do this? But it's not showing me what's on my window. That's the problem now. It's not showing me what's on my window at all.
Is it a presentation that you could possibly just talk us through? Does it have to be presented?
No, it doesn't, but it's a real shame because you get the flavor of.
I know it's
going
to
be. Do you want me to, Flo? I can send you my email address, and if you mail it through, and I'll share it for you.
Perfect. Right. Let me just unmute this.
Wonderful. Right, we're just sorting that out. I'm absolutely delighted to let you know that the founder of Maternity Paternity CPD project, Emma Shepherd, is going to step into the fold at 9:50 or a little bit after 9:50 to do a presentation. So we're just setting Emma up for that, and we are just helping out Flo with her presentation. If you do have any technical issues, don't worry, we will save you. We're completely inept, but we will click buttons until either we break the internet or we get you working. So just hold with us for that, and everything will be wonderful. We obviously want to see everything that Flo has put together, because that's clearly going to be really important. We are using the hashtag WomenEd, so feel free to join in on Twitter, and also I am sharing, as each person is able to speak, the presenter's Twitter name if they use Twitter. I think nearly all of us use Twitter these days, don't we? And hopefully we will be able to get cracking as soon as we possibly can. Our little gap that was meant to be after Flo, because Holly was unable to join us, Emma is able to step in and do a little presentation all the way from France, I believe. Hopefully she's got a house now, then it's not too cold and everything's lovely. And it's lovely to see you as well, Helen, sort of just waving at you. Be lovely to hear from you. I know you're on at about 10:10. We might get a little bit of slippage with timing, but we might not. Things work out in the end. We started a bit earlier today, so it might all fall back in together. So absolutely lovely to see you today. For those of you that aren't sure what's happening later on, and hopefully everybody is getting in, at about 10:10 we have Helen talking about the role of coaching. At 10:30 we have Narada Roy, a career toolkit for female teachers of colour. 10:50, Laura Bain, all the way from Australia. I mean, if you're in Australia, it's just around the corner, isn't it? It is talking about the challenges and importance of women leading in the ed tech space, probably more relevant today than it ever has been before. So thank you ever so much for that. 11:10, we have Loretta Fern and Angie Au, in Germany, I believe, talking about breaking up with the imposter syndrome. So brilliant for that. 11:30 till 12 we have our first panel of the day, Women Ed England. That's Claire, Christella and Ruth joining us to talk about disrupting and reshaping educational leadership. Obviously all of these are recorded. They will be put onto the Women Ed YouTube channel shortly, so if you're not able to stay for the duration of the morning, or you're not able to join us the rest of the weekend, you will find all the presentations and all the resources there. Natasha and Flo, are we getting any closer? We got a few funny faces. Hopefully.
Not quite yet, Kezia. Give us 2 minutes.
That's okay. We'll get there. It's obviously around about this time of each day where I probably do have to start singing, but I'll try not to, because that'll be really scary. I hope everybody's fine. We do have the theme this weekend of if you're not invited to the table, just pull up a chair. But also redesigning that table so that it suits all of us, regardless of who we are, where we are, or what is important to us. And I think it's really important Women Ed don't censor any sort of views on sort of educational leadership. We are enabling all women around the world to have their voice, make sure it's heard, and that we value one another as women leaders. So let's be thinking about that table. Let's be thinking about how we pull up and talk about things. And a viewer who just presented shortly ago says, if anyone's got any questions, happy to answer. So feel free to add them in the chat. Feel free to put them onto Twitter. She is on Twitter as @KnitKnitQueen, which would be lovely. We have Natasha and Flo that are battling technology as we speak. Not sure if it's working, but we'll see whether we can get it to work.
I don't think it's gone through because the file's quite large, so
Okay, all right.
Which is annoying. It's just that these kind of things just ticks me off, because having spent time preparing.
Okay, well, do you know what we could do? Helen, if you're ready, we could start with you, and then I could then kind of organise flow and get on a phone and try and sort that out. Should we try that?
Yeah, that sounds good. Do you want me to
Okay,
just see
cool.
if I can share my screen? Does that?
That is working, Helen.
Super.
So, Helen, you are wonderful. Thank you ever so much. We will get flow to you as soon as we can get that sorted out. Helen, thank you ever so much for joining in. We're going to hand over to you now while we try and sort out our technical issues. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, I suppose, thank you for inviting me is the first thing. And it's really great to meet you because I see lots of you on Twitter, but not kind of in person on Zoom. So can I just check, is this a practice session that I'm in on, or are we going for real?
It's the live one, darling. You're going live.
Okay, I'm happy to go live. Here we go. Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's really great to be here with everybody today. And it's great to see lots of what I would call my Twitter friends and Twitter community here from all over the world. Today, my session is going to be on the role of coaching in being braver. And I'm a senior practitioner coach with the EMCC, and I've been coaching professionally for about 7 years now. And I think, one of the things I've learned from coaching is that there is opportunity for everybody to grow both personally and professionally through coaching. And the question of how brave is brave enough is a really interesting one. I know that the strapline for Women Ed is about being 10% braver. And I think when I think about the women that I coach in education, they range from newly qualified teachers, or ECTs as we call them in the UK, through to middle leaders, senior leaders, and executive leaders. And I see lots of different themes coming through that coaching, but a lot of those are themes that are in relation to the table, and lots of women experiencing barriers, hurdles, and imposter syndrome as well. And I think for me, coaching has a really important part to play in elevating everybody's voice. When we kind of think about coaching, when I think about why I want to coach, I think about kind of the different journeys that people have in their lives. And I think about my own journey. And I've had lots of different opportunities within education, both as a teacher, as a senior leader, as a coach, as a trainer. But most of those opportunities have come about because at different points in my life, somebody has invested some time in me. And although that often hasn't been formal coaching, it's had elements of coaching because people have given me their time and they've listened really carefully to me and helped me to figure things out and to work through some of those challenges and some of those problems. And I think that relates really closely to what I want to talk about today. How do we get the best out of people? How do we empower them to be braver? So if we take the theme for today, which is the seat at the table, for me, coaching isn't about telling anybody how to take their seat or what the table should look like or where they should sit. Coaching's about helping people to figure out where they want to be in relation to that table and what they want that table to look like. And it's in many respects an opportunity to do that through conversation. And that's kind of a really interesting way to look at it. So if we kind of look at what is coaching, I've got a quotation from Julie Starr. She writes a lot about coaching. She's really interesting. I'll just give you a moment to read that quotation. Okay, and in the chat, it'd be really interesting just to see that when you look at the quotation from Julie Starr, which words really resonate with you when you think about coaching and when you think about your seat at the table. So I'm just going to give you a moment if you want to share in the chat. Is there a word or is there a phrase that really resonates? Yeah, it's really interesting. That idea of, a conversation with purpose. I think that for me is really interesting. I would probably add into that and boundaries, because coaching is within a very clear and a very safe, ethical framework for people. Again, we've got the word space. I don't know about any of you, but life is busy. And sometimes I think what coaching helps women in education to do is it helps them just to pause or to stop. And sometimes we need to pause or stop before we actually move forward again. And creating that space for people is really important. Think about how many times we say, I've only got 10 minutes or I've only got an hour. If we change that to we've got a whole 10 minutes or we've got a whole hour, then our mindset just shifts. And I think that's really important to sometimes try and create that sense of space and time for people. Stacey, you've put opportunity as well, that it's equal and inclusive. And I kind of really concur with that. Coaching for me is for everyone. And that notion, again, somebody's put being heard. Often we listen, but we listen really superficially because we're busy. And actually listening to understand rather than listening to respond to somebody is really important. And I think that presence is key. I usually carry a portfolio of about 50 coachees across a year. And I think one of the things that I really enjoy about that is just having that time and creating that space. Sometimes we don't get to solutions. Sometimes the solution comes over a sequence of sessions, but giving people a chance to hear their own voice really matters. And that's something that I think we don't do often enough. So, when we think about what is coaching, there isn't a set definition. There are lots of different ones, but I think some of the ideas within that really resonate with the way that I want to work with coaches, and particularly can be of benefit when we're working with women in education. That opportunity to figure things out and do some great thinking. One of the questions people often ask me is, well, why should I bother with coaching? I think for me, there are lots of different reasons, but coaching ultimately leads to better conversations. I think it can have a really positive impact on well-being. It can also kind of help people think about their goals more clearly and some of the challenges that they face in relation to their goals, particularly if we think about today's context in relation to the table. It is that safe space where trust is high. Coaching isn't hierarchical. It's about establishing that genuine and authentic partnership. And I think when you establish a relationship with a coach, it's a really interesting relationship because it's completely flat. And I think certainly my experience of coaching would say that it's reciprocal. I learn as much from my coaches as I ever do from the coaching process. It's non-judgmental, it's really open, and it is that opportunity, like I said, to listen to your own voice. And the kind of the next bullet point really interests me, because when you see leadership styles and you see them presented on a PowerPoint slide or in a book, authoritative is always at the top of the list and coaching is always at the bottom. Yet coaching is about the investment and in the long-term growth and development of people. And I really think we need to rethink that one and flip that one further to the top. The notion that authoritative leadership is the most impactful, I think is a real misconception. I think when we're thinking about sustainability and what is it that lasts, it's about developing people through their whole career. It's about building that agency and empowerment. As a coach, you don't tell, we don't give advice, we listen and we probe and we ask questions and we help people to figure things out for themselves. So as well as helping them to establish their goals, as well as identifying maybe some of those challenges and some of those hurdles, the other thing that we really try and do in coaching is to identify those first steps or those actions that will help people in relation to their goal. So in this case, to take their seat at the table, to turn the table over, or to smash the table up, whatever it is that your goal is. I think that last point for me is key, which is, you know, it's tempting to think that the coaching relationship is cozy. The coaching relationship sometimes will be slightly uncomfortable because it will really get you to reflect on yourself, your own position, how you're feeling. And for me, coaching shouldn't put anyone into the panic zone, but it should help you to get into what I call the stretch your legs zone, the zone where maybe you are just that little bit braver, you push yourself just a little bit more. So if we kind of stretch that out and we kind of, you know, go a little bit further with that, you know, it's really interesting, Casey, you put a point, are women often more comfortable coaching? I don't know. I think women often really like to listen. And I think that whole thing about really listening and then responding in a meaningful way is something that lots of women feel very comfortable with. And I think then developing that professionally can be really helpful. If we push it on and we think, okay, you know, where does coaching start? I often think coaching starts with reflection. And it starts with drawing on what you already know, your own experience. And, you know, the first reflection that I pose today really for you is to think about a time when you were brave, whether that be professionally or personally. How did that feel? What words would you use to describe that? What did you learn from it? And, you know, as the image says on the screen there, sometimes you do have to be your own hero. And, you know, that bravery might be the first time that you stepped into a car on your own without a driving instructor. It might be the first time you stepped into a classroom. It might be the first time you applied for a job that you thought perhaps was a step beyond. But it is about really drawing on your experience of being brave and thinking about how that can really help you move forward. What did you learn? What can you take from that that might help you in the future? And coaching often will start with a reflection where you just talk that through. I think one of the things for me with coaching that's really powerful is allowing people to voice things and to give them the space to, again, hear their own voice. And, you know, if you were to voice a time when you were brave, what would emerge from that when you're given the space to speak and where someone is really present and really listening to you? I think from there, you know, it can be scary. I think that's a really good point we've got there in the chat. But again, it's about creating those boundaries in coaching through contracting. From there, we might do a scaling exercise. So I might just ask you to humour me a little bit at the moment and say, okay, if we think about a scale, and if 0 was in that situation where you identified your bravery, 0 was that you weren't brave at all, and 10 was you were that superhero, what score between 1 and 10 would you give yourself in terms of how brave you were? And then from there, we might explore what a 10 would look like. And then we might explore what it was that perhaps got you, if you said you were a 7, from a 7 to an 8. And then we might apply that to a current situation where, you know, you're thinking about being braver or taking that seat at the table. And again, to score that, and some of you might score that as an 8, somebody might score it as a -642. The number doesn't matter, okay? The number's irrelevant. It's about really taking that time to explore where you're at. It's about your coach meeting you where you're at. And it's about then thinking about what that 10 would look like for you, so your goal. And then identifying perhaps those first steps that you might take. And, you know, I'm kind of thinking, Emma, you've put there, you've just done a Wonder Woman stride down the corridor with, you know, kind of the DIY clothes into those Breton stripes. I'm matching you there today. But I think that whole thing about being braver, and, you know, were we braver 20 years ago, Robin? Does age impact our bravery or experience? I don't know. That's a really great question, and one that I think maybe I'll take away to think about. But a coach working through a scaling exercise can be really powerful. Working through a scaling exercise yourself and really voicing that on a piece of paper can be equally powerful. And there are ways to engage in coaching where you self-coach as well. So kind of time is pressing on a little bit. I'm going to just again try and engage you in an activity and say, okay, we're talking about taking your seat at the table today, and we're talking about the role of coaching in being braver. The first question I'm going to ask you, if you've got a pen and paper in front of you, is just draw the table. Or if you want to, draw a metaphor for the table. What does that table actually look like? Where is the table? My second question would be, where are you in relation to that table? Draw yourself. And then maybe begin to think about what it is that has helped you to get to that point. You know, and if we were working on coaching, I might ask you some questions like, where do you want to be in relation to that table? And what is it that will help you to get there? And when you get in that seat, what's it going to feel like? And again, when you get to that table, what are the benefits of being there? How will you use that seat at the table? And who else might be there? And perhaps when you are at the table, what is it that matters most? What's important? And when you're at that seat, what advice would you give to you? And obviously we've moved through that very quickly. That's probably at least a full coaching session. But I think the chance to explore that can be really powerful with a coach, because it's about exploring how you can be braver and how you can take those first steps. For me, change begins with one thing. And when we think about being braver, it's about maybe taking that time to reflect on yourself and think about coaching and think about the table and think, what's the one thing that will get you moving in the direction that you want to go? And then thinking about what the ripple effect of that one thing might be. I'm coming up to time now, I think, so I'm going to pause there, but say thank you for engaging with me. I hope that in relation to the table, you're able to take the steps that you're able to take. I hope that some of you who engage with coaching keep engaging with it. I hope that some of you who have never engaged with it might feel tempted and feel that it might support you to take that seat. And I really kind of look forward to the rest of the day and the rest of the conference. Thank you to everybody who's organised it, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. Okay, thank you.
And that was absolutely lovely, really lovely, reflectful and calm on a Saturday morning when behind the scenes a few of us are going like the clappers. Really interesting thoughts there. I've always, I'm not a natural person to either be a coach or to be coached, and yet everyone tells me that's why I should bloody well get on and do it. So thank you for that. I think that's been really useful. I know I'm absolutely delighted that Emma Shepherd has stepped in, and I'm not sure if she's going to come next or whether she's sort of going to be after Flo, if we've got Flo sorted. Natasha, how are we with Flo at the moment?
I think we've got Flo sorted. Helen, I was obviously multitasking and listening to you and trying to sort through stuff, but I've actually had coaching myself, and honestly, everything you were saying there resonated. Like I was in a really like a really confused state at one point career-wise, and by having coaching, it definitely grounded me. It definitely gave me some insight into what I really wanted. So, you know, I completely agree with everything you said, and I'd actually recommend it to anyone and everyone. Kezia, definitely.
Thank you. I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it? I love to talk. I'm an English teacher by trade. We love to talk, and I actually like the discipline of coaching because it stops me from talking and makes me really concentrate on listening. And I also like the process of it. And I think there's something about really trusting that process. So I've kind of done it on both sides. I have a coach. I also coach, and I think on both sides it's such a powerful experience, and it really kind of slows things down in a busy world. But thank you. It's been really great to be here and great to be part of the conference across the next couple of days.
That's brilliant, Helen. Thank you for joining us. And I've tweeted out some of Helen's details if anybody else would like to follow her. Helen, are you okay to stop sharing your screen? And we're going to have Flo. We're going to have another go. Yeah. We're nothing if not persistent. So let's see if we've fixed this particular.
Fingers crossed. Let's. I'm always happy to try this twice. Let's see. Oh.
Hallelujah. It is worked.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm an artist supporter. So.
I tell you what, I'm not going to say Flo is doing this for dramatic effect, but we've had a little pause. Helen, thank you ever so much for being able to step in. We're going to have Flo's presentation now, and then it's going to be absolutely wonderful to hear Emma's presentation as well, jumping in at the last minute because she's a saviour. So absolutely, without any more me wittering on, I'm going to hand over to Flo. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. As like most things, life never goes easy. It throws you curveballs, and it's about having the patience, kind of just work through things. And I guess we kind of do this every day when we work. A little bit about me. I thank you for Kezia and Natasha for inviting me. Like all things, I saw this talk a while ago, this topic, and like all things, I'm a lastminute.com, so I left it till the day before. I think I saw a text by Vivian Porritt, and she said, "Oh, are you doing this?" And I was like, I haven't got anything, but I think F-West said about being 10% braver. And one of the things I was wanting to try and do was be 10% braver. So I said, okay, I will find something. And I didn't actually have anything to talk about, but I guess what we do is, so I dug really deep and started thinking about what do I know about, what do I talk about? And I thought I would talk about my experiences of where I've been in this year. and the young people that I work with. And then I found the rhythm, I found the writing. And so I wrote this literally, that I wrote it on my phone. So, have a quick read of it. And so you wrote that sometimes we do things and I have advantages more than compared to some of the young people that I work with. And I asked myself, what could I do? And one of the things I said, with the basis of what this presentation is about you come to the table with a different chair. Well, I think in what I would do, I would just say, I'm going to kick the doors down, because that's how some of us have to get in. And there are ways you get to the table. And first of all, I think you need to know what you want. That's what I've found over the past year. Secondly, you need a champion, those who see something in you and champion you. And third, you go with conviction. And if my seat is assured, I would ask myself, how would I make space for others? How would I make space for the young people that I work with? So we talk about, bringing a seat to the table, but for a lot of the young people that we work with, they don't see that. And so I want to ask you a question, how do we as practitioners, how do we create space and opportunity for young people to bring their own chairs to the table? And it's taken me a while to sort of think about, actually, yes, we talk about those in education, but how often do we as practitioners, do we really create that space for young people to come to the table as they are? So their chairs are not going to be like ours. What happens when we facilitate that space? So I just want to think about, you might want to put in the chat some of your thoughts as to how you as practitioners have created a space for young people to bring themselves to the table. And we know that they're not going to come perfect. Some of them will come with challenges. So do we facilitate them? And if we do, what does that look like? So please do put some points in the chat, and I will just give you a few minutes to pause there and think about that. And so when thinking about the presentation, this is really what came up for me, in the past year. What have I done? Have I really created spaces? Have I been honest? And we need ingredients. And I like cooking. And when I am in my best space, I literally can just get on with it. Everything is ready and I cook. And I think it's about being ready. I've got everything prepared and I just go for it. We need time. We need time and we need space. And when we've got that, we actually flourish. And the young people that we work with, they can flourish as well. So we need all the ingredients, but sometimes we have to work with what we have. And some of the students that I work with, they actually come with different perspectives. They don't see aspirations in the way that we see them. They may not have that idea. They might not even know what they want to do. So their chair is already broken. It might have, 3 legs. It might not have the back. It might not be comfortable. But do we allow them to bring that to the table? And so one of the projects, as I'm an art teacher, and what I wanted to do was a project about identity. And it's really crazy because I just thought, I want to do this. There's no reason. I just thought I wanted them to design a chair, choose an artist, and then put something of themselves in that chair. And the idea is still, I've gone through many phases of it, many iterations, but as a project, I'm committed to doing it because I actually want to see what they come up with. It could be that they break their chair and make a sculpture and put it back together in a way that they hadn't thought about before. So it's giving them the opportunity to get out of their comfort zone. I think Efwa said something this morning when we were speaking. She said about, what does inclusion mean? So for me, this is a way of being inclusive. Because do we really think about them? Do we really allow our young people to have that space? And so what I looked at when I first came up with this quote if you're not given a seat at the table. I actually got this book, I Dream a World. When I was at art school, I was given to it as a present. And in the book, I saw inspirational Black women. So I saw Marian Anderson, Maya Angelou, Rosa Parks, Elizabeth Catlett, brilliant illustrator, Shirley Chisholm, and Wilma Rudolph. And for me, as an adult, I really began to understand, what does this quote mean for me as an adult in education? How does it look like? What do I do? And so I think we need to think about, I began to use this quote and think, how does this quote work for me when I'm engaging young people? What is it that I actually do? And so we came to the idea of having different stories. And we live in a society where where things are not, they're not equal. There are the haves and there are the have-nots. And somehow education is part of that. And for all the faults within education, it's not balanced. You know, one size does not fit all. And yet we expect our young people to come to the table and access that. And some of the young people that I work with, for them, their experience in education has been traumatic, particularly for some of them in mainstream. And so a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't really work. For me, this is my opinion, I don't think it works. It's meant to be a table that all are meant to access, but not all of them do. So like I said, some will come with their chairs broken, some will come with smaller chairs, and some will come with chairs that actually just don't fit at all. So what do? How can we change this? I work in alternative provision, and I chose to do that because lots of things, working within mainstream, I wanted to see, what could I do? I've spent about 10 years within mainstream education, and an opportunity arose to work with an AP and work with young people. And I remember going for my interview, and one of the young people there, I did an observation, I did a lesson, and one of the young people said, are we allowed to swear? And I was like, well, you can, it doesn't, are we allowed to say F off? And I was like, of course you can. And I think that kind of took the wind out their sails, because the young people there, they do come with their trauma, they are challenging. But what I also realized, it was about building relationship. It was also about building trust. And that's where we started from. So the screen in front of what you can see on the wall that's my room. That is the work that the young people that I've been working with for the past year, that is the work that they have done. And for many of them, their experience of art has been quite low. Some of them haven't had the options. Some of them haven't felt good about drawing, or they've just felt it's not for me. And I think that, so by the time they've come to me, we kind of work through this, and we're quite subtle as to how we get them to engage with an art. And it's, for me, I always tell them, it's not about being the best, it's just about trying. And then every piece of work that whatever student does, even if it's someone did a Man United badge, it goes up on the wall. And I remember when we decided to display the work around the school, and we got some frames, and everybody was checking, is my work on them? This is my work on the wall. So it's really quite funny for students who have no interest or weren't concerned about doing art. All of a sudden, they wanted to know, is my work on the wall? Does my work have a space? And I was like, yes, everybody's work is on the wall. And so how did I turn these individuals how did I tell them to consider the steps whereby they could all of a sudden see something where before they probably didn't have any idea at all? And it is about building trust. It is about building relationships. And what I've noticed, it was about having conversations with them. And some days it would be they'd come into the room and I'm not doing any work today. I'd be like, okay, take a seat. And they'd sit down and they want to talk about anything except art. So we had conversations about, God knows, we went down rabbit holes, cul-de-sacs, and then they'd pick up the pen and then they'd do something small. And it was that idea of doing something small every day. You know, if they had a bad day, the first thing they do when they come in the morning is, all right, miss, a little fist bump. How was your day? Doesn't matter what happened the day before. Every day they came in, especially the boys, they'd come in, the girls would come in with their morning drinks and just want to sit there. I'm like, okay, I've got a lesson going on, but no, miss, can we just sit here? Okay, by all means, you sit there. And I would teach. I'd have a class and the conversation would be going in both ears. But I like that. And so this is what we got out of them. This is, I work with an incredible team. I have a head of department who allows us as practitioners to really flourish. And in turn, that confidence goes to the young people that we work with. And they get that confidence too. And somewhere along the way, magic happens. And the work you're going to see now is the work of some of our GCSE students who, when they came to us, didn't think they would ever get to this point. So there's the work of some of our students. I'll just go through, you can see them. And we got the most amazing grades, whereby they may have thought, I'm not going to pass. They did. They got the most amazing grades. And it was really, I was really humbled to see them all come in this year and pick up their exam results and just smile. And this young man here who did this piece of work for the exam, I remember the morning of the exam, I had to phone him up and say, I need you to come in. And he was asleep. And I said, I need you to get yourself to fill it, sign your form because your work is going in. And to his credit, he did. He rolled up with his red eyes and he came in. And he, you know, he's now gone on to the next step. And I just think it's I'm really privileged to be able to know that when the young people that came to me originally, for them, it was just like, oh, I'm just going to get through this. But to see where they've gone on to see how they've flourished, to see what their next steps are, I couldn't be any more proud of them. And when you get a young person who sent me a text, and I remember this young person, so I got this out of the blue. And, you know, I like the fact that it caught me unawares because I think this is what we don't know our influence and we don't know the measure of work or influence that we have on the young people that we work with. But when you get the text like this, you actually realize that a lot goes on. We think they're not listening, but they actually are. And this, it kind of had me when I saw this quote, and I was like, so maybe I'm doing something anyway. And so I'd like us to think about, I've no idea what kind of chairs our students will end up with. But my journey is with them. And I think is the question I would ask, how far are you prepared to meet those who come to the table on different chairs? And we had a talk by Rachel Higginson, and who's on Twitter. She's an educator. And she says that children's stories are not written. With great staff and the right narrative, anything is possible. And I'll just read that again. Children's stories are not written. With great staff and the right narrative, anything is possible. So that is my take on the different chairs. And it is, they bring their different chairs, different stories, but they will all have different outcomes. So that is me. Thank you very much. and I can be contacted with my email. Those of you follow me Positive Image. I'm on Twitter. So I hope that I was able to give some flavour of what I do. Thank you.
I think you gave more than a flavour. I think
I was really crying.
Yeah,
Don't.
the chat's gone a little bit bonkers, Flo.
I'm sorry.
Everyone's very moved by some very beautiful work, and it's complete fate it worked out this way. I think your session built really meaningfully on Helen's session about coaching and about how we enable other people to, you know, shape their own chairs and bring their own chairs, whether they're our young people or whether they're other professionals that we work alongside. Absolutely. So that was absolutely beautiful. If you don't follow Flo or Helen or anybody else presenting on Twitter today, please do so. You can learn so much and just get involved in the banter and everything else. Thank you so much for that, Flo.
No, it's anybody got any questions?
Inspiring, like just honestly, and it didn't even for me. I'm walking away. I'm not physically walking away, obviously, but I'm coming away just thinking, look, what else can I do to ensure that all of, you know, the young people I'm working with, make sure that they feel that they actually have, you know, they have some presence in there. You know, how am I making sure that I suppose provide them opportunities for that? But physically having them working on chairs was absolutely amazing. I was just like, wow. And just, yeah, and I could just your passion as well, like I can feed off of your passion and just the way you delivered that. It was amazing. Honestly, like everyone in the group was like, wow, wow, wow. It's really, really good and really inspiring. And just young people are just so lucky to have you working with them. Can I just say, I wish I'd had people that, you know, when I was in school that were working with me like you, because, you know, that positive image and that, I suppose, reassurance, and you feel like a safe space. And
I think that's it, Natasha. I think that is the bit. It is about that safe space. You know, as I said, they may have had a bad morning, but it's like, you know, yeah, we're going to Flo. If they're in trouble, we're going to Flo's room. And I'm like, I'm teaching, but okay, take a seat. We'll deal with this. And it's just, you said, it's that safe space. And yes, as I work with an incredible team, and this is what we do.
Thank you so very, very much for that. And I can see why the file was quite meaty, and why it didn't just take 3. It's not just a couple of quotes, is it? That was quite a lot of artwork.
No, which is why I thought, no, I'm not just going to speak. You're going to see it, because
we needed that. We needed that.
Thank you for persevering.
You're welcome. Yes,
I'm absolutely delighted that Emma Shepherd is able to join us. She's done a very quick change, literally, I think, because from the sounds of it, you were decorating your new house in France. So we're going to hand over to Emma without any further ado and just let her do her stuff. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. And despite very clear instructions that Mummy is speaking, Lucy has immediately jumped into the call. Lucy, you can't call. You can't. Okay, you can sit with me. You can't.
Emma, I remember going to the DFE with you and a very, very young baby, and still made more sense than the Minister for Schools at that time. So we just persevered. Don't you worry. Just get cracking.
Well, she's well trained. This is the very young lady that was at the DFE with us all those years ago. So she's a bit bigger now. So I'm really thankful to be able to jump in. So thank you very much. I told Kezia I'm a total glory hog. So I love being able to present and to share with people and to talk in this way. And I'd just like to talk a little bit about what is preventing mothers. At the Empty Project, we speak on behalf of mothers and fathers in the education system. As a female-dominated industry, you can imagine that mothers do come up more often. So what's preventing mothers from taking a seat at the table, and how we can make room for them and their children to pull up their chairs. So we've been doing, boring, bye. So we've been doing some research into women aged 30 to 39 to see what's making them the biggest demographic every year to be leaving the classroom. And although we know that women in this age bracket are not all mothers, many of them are, about 83% of them who are leaving are, and about 90% of them who stay are. And we've broken up our research into a number of reports that we're publishing as part of our Light Research subscription. partly because the data set that we've got is so huge that I'd sort of got to a very teary point where I was thinking, how am I going to write this all up? And then a lovely lady called Liz at King's College suggested, well, why don't you do it in smaller reports? And so this infographic is from a report that focuses on career progression and professional development in this age bracket, and the experiences of teachers, female teachers aged 30 to 39 who are mothers, their experiences of CPD and career progression and how it influenced their decision to leave. So what we found as we were writing up this report in response to the 27 qualitative interviews that we did and the 418 survey responses that we got back, is that there are a number of things when it comes to CPD and career progression that are presenting themselves as barriers to mothers as they try to stay in education, and eventually things that act as the push factors that make them leave. So I'm going to start here just in the middle where you can see the little the icon with the woman with the baby. And essentially when teachers go on maternity leave, they are physically absent from school. And this physical absence is an unavoidable factor in why they are missing out on progression opportunities, on interviews, on vacancies that come up, on informal opportunities that are spoken about in the staff room, on hearing about CPD opportunities, about the mentoring that might be happening at school, or the shadowing opportunities, or those opportunities just for networking and reflection that happen every single day in school. And obviously, when you have a baby, you want that absence to a certain extent. You don't want to be continuing working, and we're very lucky to have the maternity rights that we do in the UK in comparison to some other countries. But that physical absence just means that because women are not at the table because they're busy having babies, they're not hearing about some of the opportunities that are available to others. Now, because that absence happens, there are actually laws in place that mean that women do have to be contacted for 3 reasons when they're on leave. They have to be contacted if there are any redundancies that impact their role. They have to be contacted if there's any changes structurally to the school or to the organisation that change their role. And they have to be contacted if there are any interview, promotional opportunities or vacancies that arise. They have to be contacted and told how to apply for them and what the role is in case they want to apply whilst they're on leave. But what we saw happening in our research was that the schools were essentially just failing to adhere to that legal duty and contact teachers when those vacancies arise. So teachers would come back from maternity leave and find that a role that they otherwise would have gone for has been filled or has been taken by somebody else who was physically present in school at the time. Now that's quite an interesting one to tackle, because even with the best will in the world, if the means of communication aren't discussed beforehand, before the teacher goes on leave, then HR or line managers could be adhering to their legal duty by emailing the teacher with the details of the vacancy and how to apply to their school email address potentially. But if the teacher is not opening those emails whilst on leave, then they won't see those things until they do a kit day or they do go back to school and log into their emails. So one way that we can help teachers to bring their seat to the table, other teachers to bring their seat to the table whilst they're on leave, is to make sure that before they go, inform them of the legal entitlement to communication before they go, and ask them if something does arise and we do need to contact you about a vacancy or about these any restructures that happen or any redundancies, which way is the best way to get in contact with you. And they might say, well, I'll be checking my school emails periodically, or call me on my home number, or here's my personal email address. So, or you can tell so-and-so who has my number and we chat via WhatsApp because we're friends, for example. So making sure that both school and the mother teacher going on leave knows what that form of communication is going to be, is one way that we can help bring their seat to the table, even when they are physically absent on leave. Now, the other reasons, if we go down sort of into the left-hand corner, that women are being prevented from progressing or taking opportunity of CPD is because of the financial restrictions of maternity leave and pay. And this is specifically because of, specifically in terms of taking up new job opportunities in other schools. So for example, if a teacher is on leave and they see a great opportunity at another school for a promotion, or even for a sideways move, or for a step down, whatever they want, they might not necessarily go for it, because if they want to start immediately after their leave, they have to pay back the 13 weeks, the 12 weeks of enhanced maternity pay that we get as teachers. So we get our 6 weeks of statutory pay, and then as teachers, we get 50% of our pay for 12 weeks. Now, if teachers don't return to work after their maternity leave, they have to pay back all of that 50% for 12 weeks. So for example, if they're due to return to work in September and a job comes up, they interview, they're successful, but they know they have to return to work for the whole of that first term up till Christmas, they might be saying to their potential new employer, I can't join you until January, because otherwise financially I'm going to be out of pocket and I can't afford physically, with all the childcare fees and with all the cost of living, to pay back these thousands of pounds of maternity pay. And their potential employer can say, well, that's a real deal breaker for us because we need somebody to start in September. So you can see there how women's occupational mobility is being limited because of these restrictions around maternity pay and conditions. And we know that there's a trust, Abby Bayford works for it, I can't remember the trust off the top of my head, but they have recently abolished the financial restrictions around maternity leave and pay that restrict women in these ways. So at trust level, they've made that decision to just waiver that policy. The other way that women are stung financially is that if, for example, you don't have children, or you want to grow your family, and you're thinking, there's this perfect job that's come up, but also I want to be starting a family or having another baby in this next year. Currently, women have to be working at their school for a year, I think. Yeah, about a year, maybe a year and a week or something strange like that, to qualify for this enhanced maternity pay. So for example, if you are currently pregnant, maybe you're 3 months pregnant and this job comes up and you want to start this new job, promoted position, you're putting yourself in a position where you are starting a new job and you are not going to therefore get paid the 50% for those 12 weeks. So you're going to be out of pocket. So a lot of women, even before they start trying for a family, will say, well, I'm not going to move just yet. I'm going to stay at my current school in my current role, just in case I get pregnant, so that I can benefit from this enhanced maternity pay. And they might not get pregnant straight away. They might have difficulties conceiving. The perfect opportunity might come up and they might miss out on it because they can't physically afford to miss out on that financial bonus of our enhanced maternity pay. So, and these are all issues that women without children, or who choose not to have children, or men just do not have to think about at all. So that's a barrier. And actually that takes a brave decision at trust level or at local authority level to say we are going to waiver that. So if you join our team at 4 months, 5 months, 9 months pregnant, you will still benefit from enhanced maternity pay. Or if you become pregnant within the first year that you're working with us, you will still benefit from enhanced maternity pay. It doesn't matter to us whether you've worked with us for a year. Now, down the bottom of there on the left-hand corner, women taking on the majority of the domestic load. This significantly impacts on decision-making, according to our research, around professional development opportunities and progression opportunities. So essentially, because women are still doing 2/3 more of the housework and the childcare than men, and that's an Office for National Statistics figure, I haven't made that up, that's a fact. They are essentially saying, well, I don't have time to do this MPQ. Where am I going to find the energy when I'm so exhausted from doing all the laundry and all the cooking and all the cleaning and all the ferrying to and from to take on this head of department position or this senior leadership position? So because we are still socially designed, socially wired to take on this domestic load, we're therefore saying no to professional opportunities in ways that that men, so that figure is about women, not necessarily mothers, but men and fathers, even fathers, are not necessarily saying no to those opportunities. The same is when we get to heavy and unmanageable workload. So because we have a higher workload in teaching potentially than other industries, and we are a female-dominated industry, mothers, when they're also dealing with this domestic load at home, are saying, I cannot take anything more on, or how could I possibly take more on with the workload that I have and the children. So they'd rather spend the time with their children and their families and keep their workload manageable than take on what they perceive as a higher workload that would sacrifice the time that they get to spend with their children and with their families, or even the time that then they would have to spend on themselves for their own well-being or their own sort of gym time or meditation time or whatever. Now, we're over on the right-hand side now. The other thing that came up in this report was that lack of vacancies within existing structures is a barrier as well. So very solid senior leadership teams or middle leadership teams, so there's just nowhere for mothers to go. That's not necessarily an issue that's particular to mothers. It's you know, if you are in a very stable sorry, you go. If you're in a stable got a very stable leadership team and there's no turnover there, then there's just nowhere for mothers to go up, and there's not necessarily the creative thinking about creating informal opportunities or supporting mothers to go somewhere else, because actually a lot of research suggests that mothers are less likely to move geographically because they are focused around a certain area. So they've got a mortgage in a certain area, their childcare is in a certain area, their commute is comfortable in a certain area. So it's more difficult for them. They're more tied to a physical location. So it's more difficult for them to move schools and look for opportunities unless that opportunity is within the same geographical location. Time with heavy workload and this domestic load comes into the conversations a lot. I don't have time to do any additional CPD. I don't have time to take on additional responsibilities. And if I do have that time, I want it to be really worth something. So I'm really resentful of being told to sit in front of an inset day or a CPD, an obligatory CPD session that I don't feel is adding any value to me. I don't feel I'm really resentful of the fact that when I ask to do something that I want to do with my time in terms of my professional development, that's denied. So there's this real sort of, if my time is so lacking, it's what I do with it is really valuable, and I want to be in charge of those choices. Now, the little pregnant icon lady, leadership's perception of pregnancy and maternity is still a huge barrier for women, for mothers. So we had a few reports in the interviews of women's voices just not being invited to the table in the late stages of pregnancy. The narrative of, well, you're not going to be here when this action is delivered or executed, so there's no point in asking you now. And actually women's expertise, whether they're pregnant or not, is, you know, their experience doesn't just disappear because they're growing a baby. So if, for example, you've got a colleague who is, you know, even a week away from maternity leave and you're planning for the year ahead, ask their expertise, get their input, ask them how they would do it, because that wisdom and that experience that they might have in their area is still valid, whether they're physically there when the plan is executed or not. Now, part-time and flexible working opportunities came into this report quite a lot as well. And what we saw is that part-time or these restrictions around time, even if teachers were working full-time and workload, meant that mother teachers lacked the opportunity to regain the required experience for progression. So, for example, a mother is working full-time, but she's taking on the domestic load at home, and she's got a very heavy workload, and she doesn't feel like she has time to do anything. And if she does have time, she's going to keep it for the things that she really wants. That might mean that she is turning down an NPQ opportunity, and therefore when she does want to progress, she doesn't have a certificate like another colleague might have, and who does have more time, who doesn't take on the domestic load at home. She doesn't have that certificate to make her shine at interview in the same way that other teachers or interview candidates might. It also came up in the report as things like teachers working part-time and therefore being told, well, you can't do this qualification because you're part-time, or this qualification happens on a Thursday and you don't work Thursdays, or this inset or the CPD opportunity happens on a day that you don't work or a day that you're not in, or it happens after school, and teachers are saying, well, I have to pick up my child and I have to be home to make dinner at that time. And so teachers missing out on these qualifications or this evidence of their experience, and therefore when it comes to progression, they don't have things on paper or any evidence to say that they've developed in some way in comparison to colleagues who are not having to manage their children, manage their domestic load and their workload as well. So that's what we're finding about what's preventing mothers from taking a seat at the table. And I hope within that some ideas about how we can help them to sit at the table. I'm more than happy, Kezia, if there are any questions and if there's time to chat further about that. I don't know what timings look like. If you want to read the full report, it's at mtpt.org.uk/light-research. And there's 7 there so far from our research, and there will be an 8th by the end of the half term on the return to work experience.
Emma, that is absolutely brilliant. Thank you ever so much for sharing that research with us. To anybody that is interested, I'm sure they'll find you on Twitter. They'll find you via the chat. Do seek that out. Both Natasha and I are heads, and we're going, are we doing everything we need to do? And it's absolutely right and proper that we get checked every now and again and just think, are we doing everything we need to do?
Yeah, this was necessary. I do have a couple of pregnant mums at school, and this was just like a bit of a like, Natasha, are you actually doing the right thing here? And it's different for me in the Middle East, because obviously we don't have all of the laws, etc., that are in the UK, but it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be done. And just things like you were saying there, like we don't have anybody that's working part-time, but are we doing things after school where people need to get off and go and get their children? Like, are we making sure that we're actually not hindering people making progress in their career and things like that? And it was just, I don't know, this is a bit of a kick up the bum actually, and a bit of a wake-up call. Like, Natasha, are you making sure that you're doing all of the right things here? And I'm a mum, and I don't know, and also I just think setting an example as well. Like, Emma, you had your daughter pop in there, and I'm like having a little go at my son at the moment. He's on the sofa, bless him, like trying to play with his trucks, and I'm telling him to be quiet, and I'm like, no, actually this is the weekend, and we are having to manage these things, and we shouldn't always feel like we need to pretend that this isn't happening, because this is the current situation, and this is a reality for many of us. So I think definite reality check a little bit here.
Absolutely, that's brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Emma. Do feel free to pop any extra information into the chat, and I know Emma is a sort of a fierce warrior for this, so feel free to ask anything and keep yourself up to date. I'm absolutely delighted that we're almost back on track, which feels like the first time this entire conference we might be almost on track, which is brilliant. Ada, I'm sorry, have I said your name right? I'm all full of cold, and I'm mindful that I've not spoken to you in person before. Thank you ever so much for joining us. For about 10 minutes I was having a panic going, where is she? And then Natasha found you just in the general audience. Not that there's a problem with the general audience, but we need to make sure we're hearing your voice. Emma, are you okay to not share your screen anymore, and we can brilliant, we can get going. I don't know if you've got a screen that you wish to share.
Yes, let me just
Awesome.
Get that up. Sorry, I usually share on Teams, but I think
after earlier panic, just seeing something pop up, it reaffirms your belief. Thank you ever so much. Without any further ado, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. First of all, just thanks so much for coming. And this is such an incredible opportunity, and I'm so glad to be here. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Anu Roy. My full name is Anuradha, but I usually get called that by my parents when I'm in trouble. So Anu is the way forward. If you need questions, if you're going to chat to me, Anu works. And at the moment, I'm a digital learning coordinator at the University of Arts in London. Alongside that, I am a Teach First ambassador. So I trained with Teach First back in 2017 to teach English in secondary schools across the Midlands. And through my role, after becoming an ambassador of the program, I'm now co-chair of the BAME Teach First network. And what that means is anybody who's gone through the Teach First program, who was a person of color, who has now progressed into education, whether that's 2 months into their next job, 15 years into their current position, we're trying in the network to bring everybody back to collate their experiences in education and then bring about change depending on what kind of experiences we hear about. So this toolkit that me and my network have put together, as you can see, it's a career toolkit for female teachers of color, because from the research that we have looked into and the private conversations that we have had with female teachers of color, we have come across some worrying trends to do with mostly how teachers of color who are female do not feel fully included in the workplace, and they don't feel like they can be their authentic selves, and they don't often feel like they can fulfill their career potential, alongside actually some of the factors that Emma was referring to as well. So we're going to take a look today at primarily how I came about with my team with coming up with this toolkit, and then I'll take you through some of the aspects of the toolkit as well later on. So where does this all originally come from? First of all, it comes from the fact that an emerging critique of diversity policies, not just in education, but across the workplace, is diversity policies don't look at intersectional impact of discrimination. And for some of you, you'll be well aware about an intersectional lens for looking at things, but for others, this might be the first time. So there is an issue when diversity policies are not fully dynamic and intersectional, because they only focus on one context or one form of oppression, wherein the reality is for many female teachers of color, the overlapping of their identities, so the fact that they are female, the fact that they're a person of color, they could be following a certain religion, they could be of a certain sexual identity. These factors all inform the experience that they have within the classroom, within the workplace, outside as well. And unless a full picture is put together about what they go through and how they feel, inclusion is not going to be effective. So the toolkit has taken an intersectional lens. Now, just to tell you a little bit about what intersectional feminism, what intersectional lenses are to do with. Intersectionality is a concept developed by Kimberly Crenshaw, an academic with roots in Black feminism. And it considers the fact that we, at any given point, are made up of several identities. So to give you an example, I am female, that's one of my identities. I am straight, that's another one of my identities. I'm from a middle-class family, that's another one of my identities. I'm South Asian, I'm English speaking. So at any given point, my lived experience is a combination of these factors and how they overlap with each other. So intersectional thinking and an intersectional lens wants to consider not just one factor at a time and doesn't want to give priority to that. It really wants to focus on the individual experiences, lived experiences. And in this case, that's really crucial when we look at female educators of color. So even if we look outside of education at the workplace as a whole, in France, an experiment recently showed that if a woman, for example, has a Senegalese sounding name, she has only an 8.4% chance of being called for a job interview, compared to a woman with a French sounding name who would have a 22.6% chance of being called for a job interview. Widely as well, if we look at just from a religious point of view, for Muslim women across Europe, based on the discrimination they face as an overlap of race, ethnicity, gender, and religion, it has really hindered their access to the labor market, where in some countries, as for example in Belgium, they have gone as so far as to say that through the research, they found 44% of employers agreed wearing a headscarf, so a visual representation of your religion, could negatively influence the selection of candidates. So first of all, for women of color, they have this issue of entering or accessing the labor market. So at the beginning, they secure a position, they have a successful interview, and then once they're in the workplace, the next issue that we have found through speaking to female educators of color is this idea of progression, of moving on and fulfilling their potential in their career. For women of color, the issue of representation becomes more acute in positions of leadership. So the data is missing with that aspect because many companies and many organizations do not consider it a priority to think about the advancement or the progression of women of color. So it's not just a glass ceiling, but it's a concrete ceiling. So the number of them in positions of leadership is rare. And then once they are in a position of leadership, if you speak to, unfortunately, any woman of color who has quote unquote made it and has gone up the ladder and gone up the ranks, and they're in a position where they command considerable power and responsibility, they're still faced with multiple instances of negative stereotypes and microaggressions, and overall a general pressure to conform to the overall culture, which essentially means they're leaving their authentic selves and they are trying to sort of chop and change how they come across so that they feel more accepted. This is a lot of individual emotional strain on an educator, and it makes them feel like they're up against an entire culture that doesn't necessarily accept them for who they really are. And it hinders their workplace behavior, but it also just has a knock-on impact on their overall well-being. So the concept of the toolkit originates from this idea of we've got to do something to have some form of systemic change where women of color who are in education feel like they belong and they feel like they can achieve their best. To move on slightly, looking into the barriers a tiny bit more, I'm just going to keep moving my screen around, sorry, because I feel like I'm blocking my view, but maybe if I just did that, that would be easier. Yeah. One of the issues that we came across when we were trying to get a fuller picture of this is, what does the data say at the moment about the way that women are included and recruited and how women of color are promoted? There are very few pay statistics about this, whether that's within the UK, whether that's across Europe, or we've looked globally. Very few employers publish statistics that are disaggregated by race and gender. So what we need from the ground up is more surveys, more research, more conversations in workplaces. So what we do have is the qualitative analysis of these one-on-one conversations that I have had within my alumni network, but I know that similar networks that exist even within Women Ed, I'm sure that conversations have been had with women of color about how they feel. Now, from our network, from the private conversations that we have had, where women have felt safe to really talk about what they're going through, a couple of points have come across. First of all, women of color in education feel more scrutinized than their white or male colleagues. And this has a knock-on impact, and it leads to worse performance reviews and barriers to promotions. And they also feel like where there are instances where they can't fully partake in workplace culture because it doesn't necessarily align with their values and their identity, they have to navigate that by going the extra mile to become likable, to become palatable, to become pleasant in a certain way, to avoid existing negative stereotypes, such as not being portrayed as the emotional woman of color or the angry Black woman. So just to give you a quick example, one of my mentors in a previous school, who was a visibly Muslim, headscarf wearing woman of color, she often couldn't come along to the staff kind of get together or the staff pub crawl, if you will, or any sort of alcohol related bonding activity. And she definitely felt like there was this knock-on effect of slowly becoming a bit more distant from her other colleagues, because the informal network building that can take place in social contexts, she was missing out on. And then inevitably that created a sense of distance where she really felt like she couldn't necessarily bond with her colleagues outside of a school context. And if we think about what Emma had referenced to before as well, additional caregiving responsibilities and all of the toil and the labor that women have to take on means that there's genuinely a lack of time in some instances as well. So when faced with this issue, she often felt like to combat it, she had to go the extra mile, and whether that was staying behind and working longer, actually visibly proving that she was marking and she was doing data late into, the evening and showing that she was committed, made her feel like she had to prove that she was still interested in being fully included, even if she couldn't go along to a pub. Whereas when I heard those sort of experiences, my first reaction was, it should be a bit more community-led, where she should first of all have somebody that she can go and speak to about that, which didn't exist. And secondly, there's got to be more of an effort about thinking from a systemic level, from a cultural, organizational level. How can we introduce a range of opportunities for colleagues of all identities, of all backgrounds, to feel like they're genuinely included? So that was some of the experiences that came up. More broadly, when we did look into some of the research that's been done, so UCL has done a really great study with the UK government looking at why ethnic minority teachers stay and why they might leave. Some of the reasons that have been mentioned are, for example, stalled opportunities for career progression. When teachers of color, and then in particular female teachers of color, feel like they cannot progress because they've been unfairly passed over for senior posts, they either look for alternative roles outside of traditional education, or they feel like they have just been in one stagnant position for a really, really long time, and they get frustrated and eventually will look for opportunities elsewhere. In this case, from the toolkit, we have started to put forward recommendations. And one of them has been really key in the sense that SLT has to play a key role in creating this structure and this culture where racial literacy of staff is up to date. There is a genuine interest in a dialogue around race and equity in a school system. And there has to be measures to support culturally relevant training and to end harmful stereotypes in ethnic minority staff development. So an example of this would be a traditional narrative of nudging Black staff towards pastoral roles, whereas from what I've seen, for example, an area that I'm really interested in is teaching and learning, is pedagogy-based, evidence-based teaching practice, roles such as lead practitioner roles, and there seems to be a real lack of diversity in such spaces. So when it comes to training young teachers of color, and specifically female teachers of color, there have got to be more open conversations about their progression, and this sense of really making them feel like any route is possible, any route that they're interested in is possible, as long as the tools and the resources and the support to do this exist. So having a think about those barriers, one of the next areas that we've kind of looked into is this journey of the problem woman of color in the workplace. And it's really something, unfortunately, that I can relate to as well. When young women of color enter the organization, and it's something that we've seen through our network, because Teach First will train somebody from the time that they usually leave university or they're in a specific industry and they want to make that switch over to teaching. So we've seen them right at the very beginning when they go along to their summer training institute and when they're just putting together those first lesson plans. At the beginning, when women of color enter an organization, usually due to the lack of diversity in leadership, they are faced with white leadership. And we have this period of the honeymoon phase where they are told that you can come to us for anything. We're so happy to have you. You're such a great addition to our team. But over time, there are certain complications that do come up when they're faced with the reality of being a woman of color in the workplace. These issues come down to some of the experiences I've already spoken about. So feeling like there's a lack of progression, feeling like they've been passed over for certain responsibilities, going through numerous microaggressions over and over again. For me, something that is far too common for myself and for other female teachers of color that I've spoken to is being mistaken for cleaning staff or hospitality staff around the building, which just gives this sense of you're only meant for certain sort of roles in the workplace, and you're not intelligent enough and you're not good enough to be in a position of responsibility, which further compounds any existing sense of imposter syndrome that we already feel. So on the one hand, we have stalling and stagnation. Alongside that, the other issue that we will come across is the fact that the existing social inequalities in the world around us are replicated and mirrored in the school system. So the power dynamics of race and gender and religion and ethnicity that exist in the real world make their way into the school system, and they come across in a variety of ways. It will be through interactions that we may have with male students. It could be interactions that we have with hostile white female colleagues. There are numerous examples of it, but they are often unpleasant instances of racism or sexism. And in some cases, if that is the culture of an organization or a school where it's not very welcoming, then women of color feel like they can't go to anybody. They can confide in each other, they can confide in somebody senior that they trust, but they often feel like they cannot go to the person who could actually do something about it. In certain cases, there are incidents where racism or sexism, harassment, and microaggressions are logged, but then the process is not necessarily thorough or fair. And often there can be conversations where there is denial, there is accusations, and women of color could go through situations where they feel like there's some gaslighting going on, and they're being made to feel as if they are not giving a full picture, they're exaggerating. And all of this becomes an incredibly overwhelming experience. I think bringing up an unpleasant incident in the first place is unpleasant within itself and really overwhelming. And then to have it be carried over a couple of months where women of color are not believed and the organization is blaming them or denying certain incidents or ignoring them, it just adds to this sense of feeling like this is not an organization that has my back. This is not a culture that is looking out for me. So over time, if we think about when they first join an organization and they're ready and they're hopeful and they want to hit the ground running and make the most of it, they slowly retreat and they withdraw and they suppress how they feel. And that has a knock-on impact everywhere, whether that's in the classroom, whether that's thinking about the trajectory of their career long-term, or if it's about how they feel on a day-to-day basis with their students and their colleagues. All of this contributes to either a woman of color who stays on and she's not really herself, or she looks elsewhere. But ultimately that means workplaces are losing out on maximizing the full potential of them. So the toolkit takes all of these instances and the pre-existing research, and we have processes in place for how we work with schools. We've worked with a couple of schools so far, and we're really hoping to expand that moving forward. Our first point is always conducting private and safe consultations with affected groups. And it's really important for us to make sure that anybody speaking to us really feels like this is a safe space to be as authentic and real as possible. Using that, we collate reflections on the internal structures of the context of where they're working, and we put together a long-term plan to transform work culture through the recommendations that we put across. Alongside this, we also run an intersectional audit of the organization or the school. We develop an intersectional diversity strategy, really emphasizing the point that discrimination and oppression does not take any one factor. It overlaps and there are multiple instances of it happening. And we use this to deliver resources and training in conjunction with SLT. We also create and embed, where it doesn't exist, policies to eradicate harmful practices, which is seriously logging incidents of racism and harassment, and embedding a long-term strategy of anti-racism as well, so that we can encourage and support networks and affinity groups within that environment moving forward. It's not about having one negative incident where we are highlighting it and dealing with it and then leaving it alone. It's about routinely embedding long-term cultures where women of color in education feel included and supported, and they feel encouraged to keep going and being their best selves. So when we look at how we put this together, part of the audit, to give you an example, is asking organizations to come forth with certain types of data. We want to think about the overall representation in the organization, specifically for women of color in management and leadership, also looking at the representation in junior roles. Once they are in a teaching position and they're moving towards middle leadership and beyond, what kind of contracts are they working on and how have those come about? Did they come about through tension and really negative conversations, or was it a supportive environment? We already know that the pay gap in education in terms of gender is already pretty bad. So if you think about women of color, it's not great either. Alongside pay, what kind of systems of reward exist? This is in non-educational spaces as well, but within teaching, how are they being spoken to about TLRs and promotions? Are the recruitment stages for schools taking into consideration how they are reaching out and including women of color in their applications and their interviews, and what kind of success rates do they have? And then looking at how are discrimination or harassment complaints handled, and is there a thorough system for warnings or sanctions to do with these incidents? Using all of this, thinking about how schools can help, really to summarize it, schools need to foster environments where there are improved working conditions for women of color. They have opportunities for career development, looking at high quality mentoring, and moving away from negative stereotypes of staff development. So what I spoke about earlier, specifically only putting forward pastoral roles for Black teachers and making these assumptions about where women of color should go. And alongside that, thinking about how senior leadership should be having more healthy conversations around increasing the representation of minority ethnic teachers. And alongside that, when minority ethnic teachers are in positions of responsibility, to really make them feel included. And even if I think a head teacher who is a woman of color goes through incidents of microaggression, she has to have resources and a system that supports her. The assumption that somebody who's at the top doesn't need any help and will not go through anything negative is not true, as the research shows us. So at any given point, making sure that there are tools and resources that exist to support women of color in their journey, on their professional journey through the workplace. So final thoughts about what we have put together. It's made up of 6 sections. We have a diversity audit, we have a mentoring section, a section that looks at working conditions and how they can be improved. One of my co-chairs, Jyoti, is a wellbeing practitioner, so she brings the wellbeing aspect and wellbeing action plans. We have recommendations for an open door policy for substantial conversations about career aspirations. We have templates for action plans to facilitate this. We have strategies for increasing representation among senior leaders of ethnic minority teachers. And we have policies in place to investigate and report all incidents of racism and how schools can embed a wider anti-racism plan long term. Wow, I feel like I have spoken for ages, but I want to take this final opportunity to thank you so much for listening and sort of have an open call for anybody here to come and build with me, consult, share this, challenge me. I've given you all my links about how you can find me. I'm really, really active on Twitter. It's probably the easiest place to reach me. And I hope that you found this useful. I'm happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
I think that's absolutely powerful. And hopefully I've managed to get a picture of those contacts, Anu, before you go off. Just so much to think about, really reflective and sort of really punchy comments in the chat. I hope you can get a chance to have a little look through it. I think it's resonated with so many of us for so many different reasons. So thank you ever so much for that. Brilliant. Natasha, have you got anything you'd like to add? I think we've both been sitting going, wow.
Yeah, and hit home actually a lot. But obviously for me as a leader in a school, but also just thinking about the kinds of things that I really need to start pushing within the school as well and making sure are happening. So I think I'm going to touch base with you after this, to be fair, to just kind of give me a bit of help, if I'm honest.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I shall be sort of pushing my mat towards it very quickly. I'm very privileged to work with a lot of women of colour, and 2 of my 3 deputies are women of colour. But I'm very mindful that they've hit that wall, and I I want to do what I need to do to support them in their next step, even if that means they leave me alone. So yeah, sort of double-edged sword with that, but that's brilliant. Thank you ever so much for that. Please do keep chatting. I'm absolutely delighted that we're able to move over to Laura. It is the evening time in Australia. She has been drinking wine probably for the last 2 hours. Hopefully she's not too tipsy. To be honest, if you are, all power to you, girl. I think everyone's pretending that they're drinking coffee, but we've probably got some Chardonnay hidden in there. So absolutely delighted, Laura, and over to you.
Thank you. Sometimes the best ideas happen over a glass of Chardonnay. I'm just going to share my screen with everyone. Okay, can you see my screen there?
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you. Great. So good morning, everyone. Good evening here from Australia. My name's Laura, and I'm coming to you from Gubbi Gubbi country, which is the beautiful Sunshine Coast on the eastern coast of Australia. And it is just gone on 8 p.m. here. Nevertheless, I'm so excited to be joining you tonight and talking alongside some of those amazing presenters. I think I just have sat here for the last hour or so with my mouth hanging open with the information they've been sharing. So I'm hoping that my little story about my journey into leadership probably illustrates some of the things that we've been talking about. And the theme this year about having a seat at the table really resonated with me, and I think my story can speak to that. What I'm going to do is start my timer just to make sure I don't go over time, because I tend to just talk. So I am the head of emerging tech and innovation at an independent school here in Queensland in Australia, and my journey to this position was long and frustratingly so when you compare it to that of my male counterparts in the EdTech world. So the thought that really came to mind when I was preparing this talk for you tonight was more about which table do you want a seat at? And I spent years fighting for a seat at the table, which I'm going to talk a little bit about later. And I discovered that actually the table wasn't all it was cracked up to be. So here's a little bit of my story. After I graduated as a little baby teacher, I went and taught in our state education system here in Australia. And I do what a lot of Aussies do, and that's go over to work and teach in the UK for a few years. So I came over to London and taught in an outer suburb of London at a little one-form entry school and did my travel. And it was over in England while I was teaching in England that I decided I really have this affinity for technology and education, and this passion for technology and education sort of sprang up. My first classroom here in Australia, in contrast, had a blackboard, had a blackboard and chalk, and one computer which I shared in a middle room between another classroom, so not exactly technology flush. So it was very hard for me to recognise that I had this passion for technology. But when I came back to Australia, I jumped into the independent system with the goal of becoming a leader in EdTech and leading the force of technology and education. So we've got a couple of photos of me there in my baby teacher days being a little bit of an EdTech leader. So my journey into my position was very long and very arduous. And it took 5 years in the end for me to get my seat at the table. So I started off as a little ICT coordinator, where I got no time off my full teaching load to champion technology with the staff. That moved into an e-learning coordinator position where I was given a day in the week to champion technology and train and bring people on board. And this is at a time in education when technology was really taking off. And I realised that partway through, I had a few different title changes along the way, but I was never really given that head position, even though there was a counterpart for me. So I was on the primary campus at that stage, championing technology on the primary campus and having this position on the primary campus. And I had a male counterpart on the secondary campus who was a head of, and I realized this was a huge disparity because I was an e-learning coordinator and I was being given coordinator pay and he was being given head pay. So it was super frustrating at the time. And I felt like there was this ceiling that I was just hitting my head on. I couldn't move any further. And this is over a 5-year period. And so this is when my first message of my talk today comes through: don't be afraid to change lanes. And it was at this point that I looked outside of my school setting into the wider world. And this was a point when I joined the Twitter community and connected with some of the technology community groups that are on Twitter. So at the time, this was the Microsoft community because we were a Microsoft school. And I started to find my own professional development, grow my ability, learn more, and build a bit of a reputation within that community. And it was that experience and that training that actually gave me legs that I could run with and take that back to my school. And then I was starting to gain the recognition that I was wanting and the position I was wanting. So I guess that's probably my first message for anyone that's listening, and having those struggles within their own school context is sometimes you need to look a little wider. It was a frustrating time in my professional career because, in contrast, I've had friends who are out in the Microsoft community that were male, that were leaping into these heads of positions at their own school within a year or 6 months, or in the case of the person that eventually took over my position at this school, a teacher that had been in the classroom for 1 year that got straight into a head's position. So yeah, massively frustrating and at times, and it felt really unfair. So I guess though, despite all that, I got my seat at the table. So I became a head of, and I was sitting on the senior leadership team feeling like I had a voice about the direction of technology and education and wanting to share my vision and my thoughts on that. But it just wasn't what it was cracked up to be when I finally got a seat at that table. And so there were some challenges, and for my story, I particularly focused on being a woman in the technology or the ed tech space. And this is something that does mirror industry. So out in the real world, there is fewer women in the technology or STEM fields. And it's kind of the same in terms of leadership positions in schools. So one of the things that was Anu pointed out was the realities that mirror the real world are happening in schools and in a female-dominated industry. Again, leadership positions, and in this case, technology leadership positions, were predominantly male. And so when I was going to network meetings of EdTech leaders in my Anglican school group, I would be the only female in the room. And it sounds like the kind of things that happen in a movie, but these things were really happening to me. Was a case of everyone would walk in the room and literally go around and shake all the men's hands, but not come and shake my hand. Or they'd go around the table and ask for everyone's opinion and just skip over me like I wasn't even there. I sat in technology leadership teams with tech operators and workers and other leaders from within the school, and literally had someone tell me not to worry my little pretty head about some issue that was being discussed. So really demoralizing and demeaning. And I guess those microaggressions, I mean, that's something we were talking about before, really start to make you feel like you're an imposter and that you don't belong in the room, especially when, and at this stage, I was still a fairly young teacher in my early 30s, in a room full of much older men as well. There was a definite power struggle. It was really hard for me. And this, for me, was a huge journey in not just learning to be a leader, but also learning to be more extroverted. I came from sort of sitting at the back of the staff meeting, not really saying boo, to having to sit at a senior leadership table and voice my opinion about things, and have people talk over the top of me. And it took me a while. And I guess that's that, small steps at a time kind of mentality, where you learn to fight back and find your own voice in those settings. So this comes back to, which table do you want to sit at? And for me, after sitting at that table for a while, I realized this is not the table I want to be sitting at. And so this is again where I looked to my wider community and I found my seat at a larger table. And so again, coming back to that message that sometimes the table's not just at your schools. We're talking about a world where the table is as big as the world. And I think it was Helen before that got us to draw a picture of our table, and my table was the world, because I feel so connected to all of the different communities that I participate in, and that's through the marvels of technology, like what's happening right now with this conference and me joining in all the way from Australia. I feel like our table doesn't have to be small. Our table's huge, and our network allows us to connect with people that support and want to hear what we're saying. So through those networks, I found people that wanted to hear my thoughts about, the progression of technology in education, and hear about what I was doing and the different things that I was trying. And my leadership grew in a different way, and maybe outside of my one school context, into a more, and for me, a more nationally and internationally recognised kind of table, where I was invited to places to speak and share because of those connections. So I wanted to move on to talking about why it's so important for women to be leading in the EdTech space. And for me, I wrote an article about this not too long ago. Girls be what they see. And so young girls that are seeing female leaders in technology start to think that, oh, girls can do these jobs too. And this is one of the dangers we have when we have so many men teaching in this field, or being the leaders in this field as well. There's a lot of research around the fact that pathways into STEM careers actually start a lot earlier than we first thought. And it does happen in these early years of schooling, these primary years of schooling, when girls form opinions about their beliefs about who does technology and who does it well, which then leads into their high school subject selection choice, which then leads into their tertiary education choices into STEM fields as well. one of the other things I love to talk to females about in education, which is a lot of female teachers in primary schools, is not to be a tech damsel in distress in front of our girls, and show them that females can actually rock with tech and do amazing things. And female representation in these areas is so important. We're at a time in the tech world, we're just on the precipice of something called Web3. We've got some amazing discussions going around AI, machine learning, and the metaverse, even something really exciting that's being discussed. And all of those things are built on the backs of who develops them. One of the articles I read not too long ago was the fact that with so many men being in charge of or creating or doing the machine learning behind artificial intelligence, that we're seeing gender biases appear in artificial intelligence. And it's really interesting to think that so many of the digital assistants that we have, so Siri and Alexa, are designated female. So there's been a lot of evidence to support that men that are building machine learning behind artificial intelligence are inherently giving in their own gender biases and things like that. When women have a lot to offer the tech industry, and I love this quote from Hillary Clinton saying that women are the largest untapped reservoir of talent in the world. There's a lot that the tech industry can benefit from women, and especially AI and machine learning in terms of the empathetic nature of women and the creative skills that we bring. There's a sector of technology that could really benefit from having more women in it. And so a few things that I've learned from my journey that I really want to share with everyone today, and I don't want to get into the pits and falls and go back and forth over the many years that I fought to become a head of or a leader in my area of education. But hopefully these things will help anyone out there that's listening in tonight. Don't be afraid to switch lanes to move forward. So if you are hitting that ceiling, then maybe it's time for a sidestep. And I think that can be something that's really scary. I switched schools a couple of years ago and realized it was, one of the best decisions that I made. And sometimes you have to do that. And sometimes the table is much larger than you think. So engage in your online networks. And one of the messages I like to share with teachers all the time is Twitter is amazing for educators. I think some of the best professional development that I've ever received and the best connections I've made have been via Twitter. And so I've made friends in other international schools, people that I've met up, and I remember so vividly walking through ISTE in America one year and having someone scream across the crowd of 1,000 people, "Laura Main," and waving madly at me, because we just chatted on Twitter, and we formed this great friendship where I went and visited her school in Singapore, and we caught up another year at ISTE, and those connections are absolute gold, and she's taught me so much, and I've learned so much from her. And so this is something outside of my school professional development that I can't find there. Especially in this definitely applies to technology. Not every school has the same appetite for technology, but no matter what area of leadership or what your vision of leadership is and your leadership style, you've got to be at a table that has an appetite for what you're serving. And that even comes down to your leadership style in terms of governing bodies of schools. If they're not meshing together, then it's not the right fit for you. If your voice isn't being heard, move to a bigger stage. And that's something that I did. I felt like I was a little squeaky mouse sometimes in my own school for a while there. And until I started to have my voice heard on a global stage or on Twitter and on other social media sites, I started to get attention back in my own school going, "Oh, you work for us, and wow, these people are all agreeing with what you're saying." And people started to listen to me, and I started to gain respect in my own context. And this definitely comes back to what Helen was saying before about taking those baby steps. And every step forward is progress. And for me, it's been a long journey, but I realize it's a journey of lots of tiny little steps for me. And it's been growing myself in confidence and growing my leadership skills, growing my coaching ability, because a lot of technology leadership is about coaching people through technology usage. And every step for me has been a baby step, but every step is a step forward. It's a step in the direction I wanted to be. And this is why I was so attracted to the Women Ed Network, was because of this mantra of being 10% braver. And it was something that really resonated with me, and something that has helped me to grow continuously as a leader. And so I brought up this comment at the start of our session today, and this is something, again, that I believe strongly resonates with the technology industry and the use of technology, is that women belong in all the places where decisions are being made. So this is not just about leadership technology, but this is all levels of leadership as well, and where decisions are being made. So I love this quote from Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So I'm probably really gone really quick. Have I gone for time? Yeah, I have. Maybe we've saved a little bit of time there. But if you have any questions for me, or if you want to come back at me about any of those things, you can hit me up on Twitter, because I love Twitter, we know that now, at Lara Bain, and I'll respond to you there. How are we going for time? Did I save us a little bit of time by speaking quickly?
You were absolutely spot
Amazing.
on. Thank you so much, Laura. Really important. And I think one of the sort of the real strengths of today is that we are talking about our table, we are talking about the Women Ed table, and it stretches completely around the globe, doesn't it? So thank you ever so much for that. I don't know whether it's heartening or depressing that we've got the same issues no matter where we are this morning. So thank you for sharing your wisdom for that. I'm
no worries, thank you.
Yeah, no. Well, I'm really excited that we're about to jump now to Deutschland. Guten Morgen, wie geht es Ihnen?
Ja, sehr gut, danke. Und ihr auch?
That's brilliant. Apart from that, I know how to order beer and say that I'm a piece of raspberry cake. So it's probably best that I stop now. Good morning, Loretta and Angeline. So excited to see you this morning. I'm going to hand over to you now. You are our penultimate presentation before we move over to the Women Ed England team. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Kezia and Natasha, and for hosting this session. And yeah, it's great to follow Laura Bain, a fellow Australian. Want to thank Women Ed for inviting us to speak. We really value how you elevate voices. Got my swag on. And so we're here to represent Women Ed DE, Deutschland, Germany. And I'm Angeline Au, the country network leader and Berlin regional leader. My colleague here, Loretta Fernando Smith, will introduce herself in a moment, and she is a regional leader in the Frankfurt area. So Loretta, I believe you've got the slides up. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I'm share the screen. Can you see the slides?
Yeah,
right?
I see this. I see the slides now. That's perfect. Yeah. Okay. So if we move on to the next one. So I'd love everyone to warm up the chat and say, I'm going to throw up some questions on here, and if you can let us know, if this resonates with you, do you agree? Like, has it happened to you as well? So the first one is have you ever received a compliment only to feel it was undeserved? And here's another question. Have you ever looked around a room and thought, I don't belong here? And have you ever been invited to speak at an event and wondered, why me? Now, if you've any of these statements have resonated with you, or like you've likely said to yourself, or someone has said to you, you're experiencing imposter syndrome. Yeah. So imposter syndrome is a term that was coined by Clancy and Imes as an internal experience of intellectual phoniness. Yeah. So to describe an internalized fear of being exposed as a professional fraud somehow, despite proven success and competence in the field. So it's an experience, not a mental disorder. And since then, the term has gained in popularity. Like, you've got imposter syndrome is often used by women as a form of encouragement to let go of nagging self-doubts. And we're going to challenge this popular common narrative. Loretta is going to share with us her journey. And through Loretta's story, I'd like you to think about the concepts of perception, bias, stereotype, and the cultural norms that were present that work to hold women back. So over to you, Loretta.
Thanks, Angeline. And as Angeline already mentioned, my name is Loretta, And I am a big lover of stories. I think that the stories that we hear and the stories that we subsequently tell ourselves allow us to show up as who we are and allow us to show up as who we want to be. So I'm going to start today with a couple of stories. And the first story I want to share is a story to a question I get asked a lot, which is, where are you from? And so this is a picture of little me in Sri Lanka with my grandfather, who was also a lover of stories. And I was born in Sri Lanka, and at the age of 5, my family fled to Germany, where I grew up as a refugee. And at the age of 12, my family decided to immigrate to Canada because of just more possibilities. And I went to school in Canada, and at the age of 22, I had my very first overseas job in Singapore, and I moved to Singapore. I worked there for 2 years. And then I decided that I'd always been too sensible, so I quit my job, bought myself a backpack, and decided to hitchhike around Australia. It was a great trip, and I really discovered a lot about myself. And one of the things I discovered is that I don't like backpacking. So it was a bit of a relief when my roommate called me and told me about this job in Frankfurt, Germany. And that's how I ended up back in Frankfurt, Germany 19 years ago. The second story I want to tell you is about how I ended up connecting with Women Ed and how I ended up this morning on the screen talking to you right now. And the story starts with one of my children, who is a he for she in training. And at the point of the story, he was about 5 years old. And we were on our way to school, and he was sitting in the back seat, and he piped up from the back seat, "Mom, what's wrong with the world?" It was an innocent and yet really daunting question. And it was his response to little bits of conversations and news he had heard around the Black Lives Matter movement. And it was a question that forced me to acknowledge that our skin color matters. It was a conversation that was a difficult one to have with my children at that point. I had always thought that being an international system and an international school would sort of be this bubble for me and my children, and it would shield us from all the unfair biases going on in the world right now. But when my child asked me that question that morning, it forced me to make some acknowledgements. I had to acknowledge that I was the most melanated adult in our school building, and that questions and comments by other adults, such as, "Oh, so you're the teacher and not the assistant," and "Wow, your English is so good," and "Where are you from?" No, like, "Where are you really from?" really bothered me sometimes. As a child, politeness was of utmost importance. I was born in a former colony, and I grew up as a refugee and then an immigrant. And I gleaned very early on that Western and white held a certain reverence. My parents' responses taught me that it was far more important to make other people feel comfortable than to question their questions or their ideas, or even voice my own discomfort or truth. And so anytime I felt frustrated or lost in situations, I learned to answer with a smile. And I swallowed their comments and my feelings. And I told myself that these were met with good intentions. They didn't know any better, and perhaps they were right after all. It may seem really strange, but until that point, I had never felt that my hurt, confusion, loneliness, or anger was legitimate or even justifiable. And so I never really truly shared what I felt or what I experienced. That conversation with my son that morning in the back of the car made me realize that I did not want this for my children. I could not control their experiences. I could not control what others might say or even how they would feel, but I wanted my children to have the courage to not only feel, but to share their feelings with their family and their friends and with the people who caused them. In my attempt to do better and be a better role model, I sought out conferences and people with similar experiences. And that's how I stumbled into a virtual Women Ed event. And I met Angeline. And at that point, I was invited to join the Frankfurt Network leadership team. I was happy to be part of the Women Ed DE conferences, turn off my videos, sit there in my pajamas, eating cereal. Network leader, that sounded a little bit scary. Was I a leader? Should I even want to be a leader? What does it mean to be a leader? Felt really vulnerable and just out of place, even considering joining as a network leader. To me, someone that was a leader was someone in administration, someone older, someone who did not have young children, someone who grew up in an English-speaking country, someone who's a lot pushier, someone who didn't get to spend a lot of time in the classroom, maybe didn't even want to be in the classroom. It definitely wasn't me. And so I told myself, nope, now wasn't the time. I was a young mom. My kids needed me at home as much as possible. I should not have any career ambitions. And besides, I'm not a leader. I'm a supporter. I'm an enabler. And surely there were way more suitable people out there than me. I mean, I wanted my children, my biological children, and my classroom children to see more women of color in the international school sector. I wanted representation, but I was hoping that somebody else could do that work. That car ride, that morning conversation just made me realize that it didn't matter how uncomfortable or how vulnerable and out of place I felt. I had to put myself out there. I couldn't support in silence. And so I signed up. Women tend to think that they're not good enough. I mean, even the data, the research supports it. It shows that we have a professional competence gap. I was aware of my own biases, and I told myself that I had imposter syndrome, maybe even low self-esteem, and I had already figured out a happy ending to the story. I was going to talk myself out of it. I mean, there were women all around me that were challenging my biases. But it didn't matter how much I talked and how much I tried to talk myself out of it. That question just wouldn't go away. And then I started to ask myself a different question. Why? Why do I even have this bias? And where did it come from? And as I started to look around me, I realized that there was no one else that looked like me in leadership. So if you've been told that you've got imposter syndrome, and don't let imposter syndrome hold you back, you've got to talk yourself out of it. Or perhaps like me, you've told yourself these very same stories. I want to share with you a new possibility, a new perspective, a new thought that has started my liberation. Perhaps, in fact, I don't have imposter syndrome because it is impossible to be an imposter in an environment and a system that was not created for me. I am different, sure, I'm the marker in the box of crayons, but not an imposter. I never fooled anyone. I never tried to. I never could have. The system is the imposter. A system which told me that it was progressive, egalitarian, and it had these wonderful missions and visions and values. A system that told me that I belonged, and yet whose physical everyday reality upheld and perpetuated biases. A system that told me I belonged, but made me feel like I was an imposter. It is freeing to know where my thoughts are coming from, to know that they're legitimate, that it isn't just all in my head. And this is just one of my stories, a story created from the intersectionality of my gender and my race. A story whose telling and writing brought me closer to who I am and set in motion the writing of a new story, a story where the marker shows up as a marker, where it shows up for other art materials and invites them and supports them and advocates for them to join the table, where it knows that a beautiful picture can be created with all of these different art materials on the table. Beautiful precisely because of the diversity on the table. I acknowledge that I've had and continue to have many privileges. And your story, my story might resonate with you, but your story will be different. And I truly believe that it is only through the sharing of all of our different stories that we can begin to understand each other, our world, and the changes that we need to affect. So I want to end today with a final story, and it is a story shared by Alex Borstein, who is an American actor and comedian. And she tells the story of her grandmother, who was a Holocaust survivor, and her grandmother was in line to be shot into a pit. And she turned to the guard and she said, "What happens if I step out of line?" And the guard said, "I don't have the heart to shoot you, but somebody will." And Alex says, "She stepped out of line. And for that, I am here. And my children are here. So step out of line, ladies, step out of line." So today, whatever story it is that is holding you back, whatever history it is that is holding you back, I want to call you to action. I want to call you to step out of line, ladies, step out of line and step into the story that you are willing and hoping to create for yourself and for your children. So thank you so much. I'm going to hand it back to Angeline now, who's going to talk to us a little bit more about how we can step out of line.
Thank you, Loretta, for sharing your beautiful, vulnerable leadership and story. It was a courageous storytelling, and it was super awesome. And it really helps us to illustrate this. And so I think, when we think about what causes women, especially marginalized and women of color, to feel like frauds, Shelby Lee is a mental health poet writing about self-love, insecurities, anxiety, relationships, and more. In her second poetry book, she wrote this beautiful poem, and I'm just going to take some time to read it to everyone. Today, I must apologize to myself for placing a hand over my mouth while my voice patiently waited to be heard. I'm sorry. Now, for those of you who have likely said to yourself or heard that someone else say to you that you're experiencing imposter syndrome, we encourage you to take that accountability, forgive yourself, and give yourself and others some love by declaring two things that we really want to declare now. We want you to say imposter syndrome, boo, and institutional change, yay. Okay, because that's what we need to do. It's the systems that make us feel like we are imposters, and social systems are designed by humanity, and so educational designers like ourselves who create learning spaces and learning experiences, we have a great influence on those systems and the biases that are put into that, and we're, as educators, part of that design. So we need to continuously work to deconstruct and rewrite this narrative that we have been told about ourselves and our place within the system, including the persistent narrative of imposter syndrome. So let me just give you some examples now of how we can disrupt by thinking imposter syndrome, boo, institutional change, yay. Okay. So first of all, okay, there's so many hidden curriculum messages that we get, unconscious biases that are grounded in the cultural norms around us that make us feel inferior. So let's spend our energies instead dismantling patriarchy and all those systems of oppression. All right. And so we need to move away from having emotional reactions that we feel and we blame ourselves and we feel like we need to change ourselves. No. Boo to that, and yay to intentional action to disrupt the institutional and systemic inequity. Instead of fearing power in spaces or having a fear of having power over people, because stepping into leadership, sometimes we fear that that's got to do with power and we're not comfortable with that. I say boo to that, and I say yay to really emboldening ourselves with power, that we can have power with people to change the system. Yeah. And let's have a really nice relationship with power, because we're going to need it to make change. Instead of talking ourselves out of a seat at the table before, it's like not applying for a position or anything like that, the boo to that. And instead, let's focus our energies on designing how we want to leverage power with others. And a title is not going to be the be all and end all of that. Everybody has leadership potential, and everybody can influence those around us and take leadership from wherever you are. And so we need to develop those pathways. And instead of feeling this internalized feeling of unworthiness, I say boo to that, and really go focus on evidencing how we do rock education. So Laura Bain in the previous session shared what Hillary Clinton's quote, where she said, "Women are the largest untapped reservoir of talent in the world." And I want to say that again, because that's how we can really make this institutional change, by providing more and more representation and evidence of how we do this. Yeah. And so what would you do with your seat at the table is the question of this Women Ed block here. And I think that, you can see this is an actual picture of a recent article in Corporate Germany 2022. Looks like this picture of a CEO lunch. And research shows that not only in this room, but in German companies, there's more men with the same first name than there are women on boards. So this is reality. This is where the power lies. And this is where some of the decisions are made. Now, if we think about that, and Audre Lorde, a feminist and mother who said, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. And so one thing that we want everyone to realize too is that the power lies with those who have been traditionally privileged and those with the seat at the table. But those with power around the table also have it if we continue to give it to them. And I say boo to that. So even the act of wanting a seat at that table is our complicit way of upholding that power. And I think we need to disrupt that. And I'm going to hand it over back to Loretta, who can show us how we can disrupt all of that and different ways we can gather.
Yeah, thanks, Angeline. So I think one of the things we need to be thinking about is instead of the table, which like Angeline sort of said, is again, this very Western centric idea of how we gather, and in a way of even coming to the table is sort of acknowledges that that is the only way to be and gather and make decisions and be together. Like, what are some other ways that we can gather? What are some other ways that we can be together? And also include those people that don't even have a chance at the seat at the table. And so these are some pictures of the children that I spend my days with and I gathering in different ways, not just around the table.
And on the top left of that, you'll also see a poster for Have a Seat. It was an exhibition that was hosted in Germany, in Berlin, where it talked about hospitality and belonging and status and rules and customs and when, where, why, and how do we sit. And it was encouraging us to have an educational playground and to play instead with the idea of gathering and the endless possibilities that can come out of that. So when you look at the next slide, then we wanted to see, how, when, where, why, and how have we gathered? And this is German Women at DE's events that we've held. You'll see these are pictures from it. We've gathered in circles, we've gathered in different ways, we've gathered online, we've and so we're redefining the table and ways in which we can play and feel belonging and dismantle the patriarchy. So our call to action for you is to think of these three questions. The first one is are my self-talk and actions promoting intersectional inequities? And Loretta?
Am I a part of upholding false narratives and imposter syndrome notions, or part of emboldening myself and women in education?
And how can we redesign the table? So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us in this session. I hope that's our 20 minutes. And so do keep in contact with us, share your thoughts with us on Twitter, and stay in touch.
Thank you.
Vielen Dank. That was really powerful. Thank you ever so much for that. And that obviously, like all activities this morning, all presentations gone a little bit bonkers in the chat, and it's continued on Twitter. So I'm sure this afternoon will be quite busy. Thank you. It's been a privilege listening to both of you today. I'm about to hand over to Claire and Christella here leading Women Ed England team. Sadly, Ruth's a little bit poorly. But before we do that, you would have seen Women Ed tweeting over the last couple of weeks about a competition where you can win some merch. I can't believe we're saying that. We have merch. I haven't got any merch. I'm really badly organised. But other people have, and they look great in it. I'll be getting some little dog things. Anyway, so I'm really delighted to announce that Laura Billingham, who's on Twitter as Mrs. Billingham, has won the merch, and we will be in contact with you very shortly. Thank you ever so much for that. Claire and Christella, absolutely delighted to invite you for the last session of the day. Very excited to hear what you've got to say. Disrupting and reshaping educational leadership, and over to you. Although I can't hear you.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? Yep. What a privilege to follow that absolutely inspirational presentation that we've just heard, and you'll see some really common themes coming through, which goes to show that not the Women Ed Not only do we all share that same mission, vision, values, and absolute hunger for the future, but we do it across the world. How fantastic is that? Over to you, Chrisella.
Well, I just thought we'd give you a little bit of background information about how Women Ed England started. So we were all excited to be leading some geographical regions in the UK. And then we were honoured to be selected through a process to be leaders of Women Ed England. And this all coincided in the month of March 2020 with the pandemic. So when the pandemic came across the UK, we were a little stuck as to how we would communicate our messages. But actually what it did is it empowered us even further to seek out of the box initiatives, how we could continue to support and not only engage our Women Ed community, to actually give a voice to the voiceless, to introduce some new voices. So we kick-started our team by introducing some new voices who've been with us for a couple of years and actually are speaking on several days at the conference. So we introduced new voices. We wanted to create safe environments. We support women through coaching. Everything that was said today by either by colleagues in Australia, Germany, globally, in the UK. The sad thing is the barriers that you all face, we all face in the UK. So together, we thought we'd unpick them. Coaching has helped us, meeting people, trying to do what all our colleagues have mentioned today and really kick that imposter syndrome out the window came to light. So we started to look at not only disrupting and reshaping, but changing the narrative. And that's when we thought of today. So we looked at, on a personal level, just recently become an interim CEO, so have been reading a lot of literature. One's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So we thought, actually, let's look at the 5 functions of disruptive leadership. And we came up with these ideas. Claire, I'm going to hand over to you.
Okay, so we started to think a lot about how we too often think that leadership is what has been presented to us and presented to us by women as well as by men who lead. And actually, we don't want to have the table that exists. We want to make our own. So I love the analogy of looking for places where women gather. And we looked at our 5 functions as being about her joy, how we actually are joyful and celebrate exactly what it is that we think leadership should look like, and we defy what's been given to us in the past. Championing the voiceless is part of her presence, that actually too many women and too many women with women of colour, women from the LGBT community, women from who have disabilities are completely voiceless, and we are part of that movement to try and champion, and that is one of the functions of disruptive leadership. We all know we're strong, but part of our strength is how we challenge injustice. It's not enough to just know that we're strong. It's not enough to just be talking about it. We need to overtly challenge injustice where we see it. We know that women leaders are often very focused, but we want that relentless focus for a lasting impact, and not for us, but for everybody. And finally, let's absolutely open the door to our passion. We know that we have so many strengths when we're passionate. We know that we have so much to offer when we unleash all the things that make us excited. And that's our 5th function of disruptive leadership. But going further, it's not just about it being about us, it's about how do we include no matter where the people are.
I'm going to start with our first function, which is her joy, defining socially coded expectations, because our aim as Women Ed England primarily is to, with regards to women leadership, is really being free to lead. It's important to lead our way. So we're not defining anybody else's way. Each way is unique, but there are a set of expectations that tend to hold us back as women. Within our own and many other societies globally. And I think it prevents us leading the way we know we should be leading. And these expectations have been aired this morning. We were talking about softly spoken. I think Laura said, I wrote some notes, your little pretty head. Things are just thrown at us. Typically, we're supposed to dress in what is defined as a feminine way, being polite, being accommodating, being nurturing. All these we've thought about this morning, whereas men are held at perhaps using words like strong, aggressive and bold. Well, actually, we're stronger, more aggressive and even bolder than you are. And I think becoming more conscious of our unconscious biases will in itself enlighten that or give a rebirth to our strengths. And we're, by creating this gathering today over these past 3 days, actually, what we're doing is we're speaking up for change. We're speaking up because we're willing to be different. We want to hire differently. We want to promote differently. We want to open doors differently. And I think Loretta, again, aired that. I've written a few notes, not to be afraid of switching lanes, and how the Twitter community helps us to defy these expectations. While you were all talking earlier this morning, I Googled, gender stereotype came up in every single presentation this morning. So I quickly Googled the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, and it states that a gender stereotype is a generalized view or perception about attributes or characteristics that are or ought to be possessed by women and men, or the roles that are or should be performed by women or men. And I just think the whole gender stereotype is therefore so harmful, and it limits our capacity as women and also men to develop those attributes. So the expectation of roles that are so openly biased just need to be removed. And my question to you is, even with those biases, over the past time where we've gathered as a women-led community, I think we're really taking the jobs that were previously regarded as men-dominated. And I think one of the key questions that I often ask myself is, how are we being 10% braver? Claire, what's our community doing to be 10% braver from your experience with Women Ed?
I think we've got many more women who actually believe they can. And when you look through so many of the blogs, so many of the things that are on Twitter, that's exactly what we see. And I think part of what we're learning about over these 3 days is actually stepping up, doing things differently doesn't always mean doing things as it exists at the moment. And that's a real power, I think, for us to take forward.
Bringing our women-edness to the table. Absolutely. I think women in leadership, especially in education, we've got so much to celebrate. We don't fit into male-coded structures. We've started to work together. Our Women Ed, I'm referring to it as a choir, not only to change the structures, but really to define it through our disruption. So we're harmonizing, we're creating this harmony amongst women globally now. When we talk about a world in harmony, we think of everyone on the same page and everyone being similar to everyone else, but actually being in harmony doesn't mean that at all. It means we complement each other in order to coexist in a pleasing way that not only we benefit as women, but we benefit with equity and equality. Singing from harmony ourselves or standing next to someone who sings differently gives a voice to the voiceless. And that's what we do through every platform available to us, through social media, by interacting, through telephone calls, by meeting face to face, by events such as these. And I think we allow the vocal contribution to exist alongside each other. And we weave this massive quilt. This entangled family becomes one and unites. And the platform today just shows how jointly we're creating this. We don't try and change what a person's doing. We don't change ourselves to fit in, but we bring about change. We allow this to coexist. We're expressing ourselves and we're releasing other people's contributions just so that we complete our own arrangement, just so that we start to create our own tables. So I think the disruption and the change that we're trying to do together, that we are achieving in doing together, works hand in hand with total empowerment. And empowering to bring about change means that we don't only amplify our voices, but we action each step of our journey, and we define who we want to be, and we define how we want to become those people, and we also define who's going to have a seat at our table.
So when we think about strength and about challenging injustice, when we're strong, we're not upholding the status quo. We don't need to replicate by deed, by action, by thought, by dress, by attribute, what it actually looks like right now. This means we have to reshape the table to be women's size. This means we need to move the table to the places where women are. We all know the stats that come from Caroline Criado Perez, who talks about how seatbelts, for example, are designed to save men's lives and not women's lives. And we possibly heard this week that Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, is actively seeking to have 50% of his employees to be women, because he's saying we can't exclude 50% of the population from places where decisions are made. And we also know about that we can't be what we can't see, which is often said, and representation is absolutely brilliant, and of course we need to start there, but that's just the first place to be. There's some questions that I'm going to ask you when you look around, either as a school leader and audit your workforce, or as an employee who's part of a workforce. Do the positions actually reflect in your school or in your organisation the population? If we know that 75% of teachers are women, are 75% of leaders women? And if so, if we've reached that point, how have we made sure that the representation carries beyond that? Are the women leaders young, old? Are they different from male leaders? Are women who are pregnant or who are parenting and caring for young children or caring for older people accurately represented in relation to your workforce? Are women with the menopause, going through the menopause or perimenopause, are they part of your workforce? Have they left your workforce? Have they stepped up, stepped down? Are there enough women of colour who are part of your leadership team? Are there women who have a disability part of your leadership team? Are LGBT plus people represented on your leadership team? And then go one step further than that. Do you recognise the inbuilt disadvantage that people with these attributes have had since their own school days? If we look at what the statistics show us about people from the working class, people with colour, people with disabilities, and we look at their qualifications and we look at where they go as destinations after they've left school, have we recognised that for some people they need more opportunities, not just the same opportunities, in order to be leaders? Do you have a plan to make sure that this happens? What are you doing about it? How are you making sure that you recognise that there are people in your workforce or in your student population who need more support, more opportunities, more exposure to things in order to be able to become leaders? Are you actively making reasonable adjustments to make sure that everybody has a voice? Thank you, Christella.
Well, what an act to follow. When we said we'll list a few questions, like boom. I think part of our strength, in all honesty, is creating a future of educational leadership. And it's not just about saying, you know, we're going to amplify voices, we're going to do things our way, you know, in a substantial manner, but actually it's about asking questions. And Claire, each one of those questions, I think we need to just keep tweeting out today over the next few days, because actually we do want to shine a light on everyone else, but it takes courage and it takes commitment, and actually it takes more than a family, it takes a global community to achieve that. How we aim to make the world a better place depends on the outcomes of events such as these. How do we give back to our community? How are women committed to the same cause making such a phenomenal impact within our women-led community? We want that to be in every region of the world, in every corner, in every dark corner, not only the light corners. We want to create this platform because it's okay to be kind, it's okay to collaborate with others, it's okay to know you can't do this on your own. We've built a remarkable community. Today you can see all the influential women that are just determined not only to build professional and personal relationships with each other, but we've become advocates of this new generation of women in leadership. We're driven to support not only diversity as humanity, but we're driven to support it at the forefront of every organisation. And I'm going to revert back to what Claire says. Does it revert back to where you're working? Or I think I've got another note from one of the speakers that said, if it doesn't, you need to switch your table and make it accessible to all women. So break that table up and create your own. At Women Ed, you know, we're driven by our 8 core values. We influence and bring about equity for all. How are we doing that? How can we build from that strength and make sure even more people, perhaps who aren't on Twitter, perhaps who aren't here today, will hear our messages? How do we just justify what we're doing for now, but for also those generations to come? In your current roles, how are you leaving a lasting impact? I'm going to share one snippet of what I've done, because it's not about me today. Today's about you, how we amplify you, how we empower you, and how there's more of you amongst our communities. So when I took on the interim role as CEO, I wasn't sure. I'm a little bit Marmite. I'm not sure if I'll be re-elected to be a substantive post. I hope I am. But the first thing I needed to address was pay. So the first thing I reviewed was our pay policy. So my question to you, my question on Twitter will be, as women, as leaders in education, what are we doing to leave a lasting impact on the communities we serve?
Thank you. And I'm going to follow that thread through. And we're looking at her passion. And we probably all recognise Amanda Gorman there, who was celebrated at the Biden inauguration. A really active choice to choose a young Black woman. And the most powerful words in her recitation for me was when she talked about where a skinny Black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. So if that is our future, if it's okay for the President of the United States of America to find a skinny Black girl descended from slaves, brought up by a single mother, in order to be able to make sure that he can shine a light, we really can. It's not enough for us to open the doors. It's not enough for us to just recognize that we are not represented in leadership. It's not enough for those of us who have been lucky enough and now possess a privilege to be in leadership, to shut the door behind us, or to start to act as if we were the old style, at the old table, like that picture of the German CEO who sat around the table in our dark grey suits, modelling and channeling those male attributes. It's time for us now to lift each other up. It's time for us to be able to make sure that when things are hard, we give each other a shoulder up. We run alongside people when they don't yet feel brave. We make sure that we recognise the people who are lurking in the shadows, who don't feel that they're able to have a voice, who don't have those personal resources or personal experiences to be able to believe that they can do it, that they can be that leader around the table, even if they see us doing it, because we might be acting in a way that we are just modelling men and traditional leadership. And when we've recognised and identified and supported, it's time to amplify, to celebrate and to cheer from the sidelines, not to be running alongside because we want to be recognised, but to be running alongside to push people along on their journey when the time's right. I've heard a lot recently about legacy and about how we create legacy. It's so personal. I listened to somebody the other day talking about how he had decided to think about his legacy towards the end of his career. It's not about us. We've had our careers when it's time to go. If we're leaders now, we've reached a position where we're able to make choices. It's about making sure we keep that legacy for other people. We've borrowed the legacy from somebody else, and for many of us, we've borrowed the legacy from people around the table now who've given us the confidence to be able to work because of Women Ed, that we can do things. And now we've borrowed that legacy and built it into ourselves. We need to pass it on. Our job as Women Ed leaders is to make sure that once we've got to the place that we want to be in whatever guise that is, doing whatever it is we want to do, but it's something that is our agency and in our way and in our image, we then pass it on and we leave what we've crafted in a better place for somebody else to take on. And when they take it on, they're not just taking it on in the way we think it should be. We're brave enough to say, go on and make it better than I ever dreamed possible. And that's why Women Ed is so important. And that's why we need to join that disruptive community that asks the questions of ourselves and of other people about what is it that we're doing, not to just be in the same places that other people have been before us, but to recognize that whole choir, that whole quilt that Christella talked about, is there able to, more than able to, craft the world in a much better place. Thank you.
Right, on that note, I think we have no words left. I think we just have actions. It's a call for actions. Come on, women, we can do this. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, everyone.
Wow. What a way to finish off the morning. That was incredible. Thank you so much. Natasha, how are you feeling, apart from possibly still battling kids in the background?
Do you know what? I'm actually not battling the kids at the moment. I'm battling my husband opening up the balcony and saying we can hear everything from outside. Honestly, I'm like that. Can you just shut it, please? So yeah, I've hidden the children and my husband came out. Guys, that is a massive call to action. Like everything you said for me was just super inspirational. I felt like I needed to get my bum up and get moving, if I'm totally honest. So no, it was really, really, really good, really inspiring. And it just kind of like just the energy that you gave during this talk today was definitely a good way to end and a good way to, oh, how cute, and a good way to just make sure that everybody's like wide awake and not only summarized everybody's messages during the sessions that we've had this morning, but really a good opening for this afternoon after lunch break as well. So thank you both so much. It was really, really good. Fab.
It was awesome. I keep saying thank you, but thank you to everybody who has come this morning and presented. Thank you for persevering with us through technical difficulties. A huge thank you to Emma, who just went, someone's dropped out, I'm going to come in, and she is on a panel this afternoon. So you get to hear her twice today. We resume at 1:15 British Standard Time. I've got no idea what time that is, wherever you are, but if you're awake, please do join us. If you're asleep or you've got to go out or have a nap or something, then all of these sessions are being recorded and they will eventually be on our YouTube channel. Please remember, all of us are volunteers. We do this alongside our full-time jobs, which at the moment is a little bit bonkers and quite busy, so we will get the things up there as soon as we can. You have been absolutely incredible as panelists. Natasha, thank you. We have persevered this morning, and to everybody that has managed to join us, just thank you. It just reminds us why we do this and why we get up at ridiculously early hours on a Saturday morning and get going. Otherwise,
thank you,
I'm going to imagine
as well.
Yeah, so thank you. We are going to end the recording now. We will be leaving today's session and see you, if you're awake, in about an hour and 10 minutes. Take care.
Bye, guys. Not guys, actually.